that we want to have answered. And of course, you know, at the core of all of this is, you know, the families who are arriving at Gatwick from the UK, obviously, to be met by the worst news possible. So we need to find answers. We need to tread carefully over the next few days. Tread carefully with the emotions of those families.
And Emma, you say it's likely that the pilots would have known what was happening, given the configuration of that plane, that they were perhaps trying to avoid buildings, all the rest of it. Would the passengers have known what was about to happen?
I think that's fairly unlikely. Seasoned passengers may have wondered why it didn't feel the same climbing as it should have been. People who, you know, there may have been former crew on board who may have thought doesn't feel quite right, but how much time there would have been between that realisation and what actually happened is impossible to say. Unfortunately, I would suspect that, yes, the pilots will have had some indication that something had gone wrong. And they almost certainly would have known that what was happening wasn't what they were expecting to happen. And I expect they will have had time to have processed that. And, you know, I think we have to tread carefully around that as well. That's, as a professional pilot myself, that's a horrific thing to imagine.
Absolutely. Emma, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon on this. There's been quite a lot of estimations made about how much fuel might have been on board. From your experience for a flight like this, from India to the United Kingdom, how much would there have been for that length of flight?
Well, you'd expect to be carrying quite a lot. Obviously, it's a long flight. I'm not sure exactly what the length of the flight is, and I don't know what the fuel burn is on a 787 because that's not my aircraft type. But
right.
You know, we would work on 2 tons an hour for an A320. So if you are expecting it to be a sort of 12, 13-hour flight, you can expect there to have been maybe 30 tons of fuel on board at least. So, you know, and obviously just after takeoff, all of that fuel is pretty much still there.
Yeah, and that's one of the extraordinary things. I mean, just thinking back to other plane crashes in history or events that are unlike this, but similar in some ways. I mean, in the 9/11 attacks, the reason they used those planes so soon after takeoff is they wanted them to be absolutely full to the brim of fuel. Crashes, I suppose, upon landing can sometimes be less deadly than crashes upon takeoff for that very reason.
Well, yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? That, you know, when you're coming into land, you've got reserve fuel, you've got reserves in your tanks, but there's, you know, a lot less fuel, especially if you're doing a long flight. You know, the longest flight that I would have operated in Europe would be 6 hours. So I might have maybe 18 tons of fuel on board. And by the time I get to the other end, it might be down to sort of 2 or 3 tons. So, you know, of course, if there's less fuel, there's less fire. But having said that, that's still a lot of aviation fuel. So, you know, and it depends what causes the crash. You know, if you're coming into land and something goes wrong, then it might be that you're slower. You know, you're already lower. There's all sorts of reasons why that could work out to be slightly less damaging in some ways. But, you know, yeah, certainly this is almost the worst scenario, isn't it? Taking off with fully loaded with fuel and then crashing into a bit. We all saw the explosion happen. And, you know, that's almost an infinite fuel source.
Terrible. And Emma, sorry, so many questions for you this afternoon, but the regulator put out that the captain had 8,200 hours of flying experience. The co-pilot had over 1,000 hours of flying experience. For those who have absolutely no idea what that means in terms of experience, that sounds like a tremendous amount of experience, is it?
Well, 8,500 hours was what I had when I stopped flying for EasyJet. So, you know, that's, you know, a pretty high experience level, certainly. So in the left-hand seat, yes, you know, 8,200 hours, that's an experienced captain. 1,000 hours, it's not inexperienced in the flight deck. It's not a brand new pilot, but it's, you know, that's somebody who's probably been flying for, you know, they might have only been flying for a couple of years. But, you know, the experience levels in the flight deck, you know, because there was an experienced captain there, we have to remember that pilots go through very, very rigorous training in order to be able to get licenses in the first place. So both pilots were equally qualified on the aircraft type. Yes, one of them had slightly less experience. That might end up, that will definitely be one of the things that's being looked at by the investigators. You know, were the experience levels right? Was there what's the culture in the flight deck? You know, was there a strong command gradient? So, you know, some cultures have been known in the past to have very sort of steep command gradients where you've got very senior captains who don't want to listen to very junior first officers. That's not, I'm absolutely not saying that that's the case here, but it will be something that will be looked at. Was there a question over that?
And huge questions, of course, in terms of what could possibly have caused this. I mean, some speculation online that the flaps in the wrong position. I mean, could that have been a mechanism that was jammed? Could that have been user error? Could it have been, I mean, it's very, very hard to sort of try and speculate really over what could possibly have gone on to cause this tragedy.
Yes, and all of those things are possibilities, and that's why we have to be very careful not to speculate and wait for answers from the black box, which come very quickly. You know, once that information is secured by the relevant authorities, which I suspect it may well have been already, or will be very quickly secured. You know, that will then be, as I say, you know, that will be gone over with a fine tooth comb to make sure that all the answers come out. And so, you know, we have to be very careful. It's always the thing that we want to do now is always, we want answers immediately, and we can't have those. We have to, you know, be very careful about that and make sure we are waiting for facts to come out. So in aviation, we do work with facts. We don't tend to work with conjecture. Of course, we all want to sort of have our comment about what, you know, it's a fact that we could see that the gear was down. That's not a normal thing to happen. What we don't know is why. So, you know, those things, the video will actually be helpful to the investigating authorities because they can actually see the aircraft as it was, you know, supposed to be in the takeoff climb. So things like that will be really useful. And we do have to be very careful. You know, everything you read online isn't always true. And we've got to.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live on Rumble, on YouTube, and on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. We're going to go over the markets. The big news today is the crash in India. I believe over 200 people are dead, and 53 of them were Brits. So I don't know of any reports of any survivors, but I think everyone had passed on that crash from Indian or Air India. I think it's the name of the airline. Yeah, Air India. So markets have opened in the United States. The S&P 500 is at 6,007. The VIX index is at 1816. Going forward, I'm going to be talking about how to trade volatility, all right, directly off of some ETFs. So that will be part of my deck, my weekly deck to show you how to do that. The Euro USD is trading at 115, so dollar is weakening. Oil is trading at 67.02. BITO is trading at 21.41. The Japanese yen is trading at 143, so there's some stress in the international markets. Nat gas is trading at 3.6. The treasuries are trading, the 10-year treasury is trading at 113.01. And Gush is trading at 23.15. DRIP is trading at 9.80. So let's talk about the S&P 500 for a second here. So we were going at yesterday at about like 6,050, 6,040. And now we're trading a little bit just above 6,000. 6,000 is a support level, but it's establishing support levels, so it could break. A very powerful support level now is at 5,750. So we have a support level at 6,000 and a strong support level at 5,750. Now, the big resistance point is going to be 1,130. So just keep that in mind. VIX is, a little bit elevated. It's above 17, right? It's at 18, 19, but it's still decent. Nothing to really worry about. I think the big worry in the market is the actual 30-year Treasury auction and how that might move the markets. If it doesn't go well, then the dollar will weaken and we might even see a sell-off in the equity market. We'll see. The jobless, or was it some job numbers came out. It jumped a little bit than expectation, but in terms of seasonality, it's really not that big of a difference. I think it was like expected was like 241K, and I think it came in at 248K, something like that. So it's really not that big of a deal, but that might be a little bit of a headwind for the economy. And that might be the reason why we're seeing the market a little bit down today. So that's what we're at right now. Please help support the work that I do. These videos are for free. I give you advice, some insight, I guess, on the markets, my perspective. We go over the news. Please subscribe to my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. I also go over some scientific endeavors and international news. So it's not just financial markets. It just depends on what's breaking. So we have to pivot. This is totally unscripted. We just react to the news, right? So we're live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, and on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you'd like to support the work that I do, make sure that you subscribe to the channels, share the links, ask your social media to follow me. And if you would like, please purchase the products that I have on my store. We'll go over them. I have ebooks and supplements and even course material that you can learn immunology and pulmonology. But you can donate. You can donate on Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee on my website, or click the links in the description of this video. And you can be a paid member to my Patreon channel. By donating and being a paid member of Patreon or purchasing the products, that helps for me to do this work for free. I put thousands of videos out there for free, thousands of videos. All right, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work by donating. Some of the international viewers want to purchase the products. I only ship within the United States. That's because of the cost of shipping. It's prohibitive to ship overseas. So if you'd like to help support, a great way to do it is to donate or to be a paid member on Patreon. I greatly appreciate everyone that has supported over the years. So let's go back into listening to GB News here.
There are still hundreds of thousands of flights getting airborne around the world every day that land perfectly safely. And it's just incredibly sad when something like this happens.
Yeah, well, Emma Henderson, I thank you so much for staying with us for quite so much time and answering all of our questions there. Really do appreciate your expertise on this developing story. That's former airline pilot Emma Henderson.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear from someone who's been a pilot for so long, so many hours of experience. We're hearing from London Gatwick, which is where the plane was heading. They've released this statement. We can confirm flight 171 that was involved in an accident on departure from Ahmedabad Airport today was due to land at London Gatwick at 6:25 BST. The Boeing 7878 aircraft had 242 passengers and crew members on board.
They added London Gatwick is liaising closely with Air India, and a reception centre for relatives of those on board is being set up at Gatwick, where information and support will be provided. Our thoughts are with the family and friends of those on board.
All right, so we're going to pivot over to MSNBC. Steve Ratner is going to be talking about the effects of tariffs.
Steve Ratner. Steve, there has indeed been plenty of speculation about how Trump's tariffs will impact the country. So tell us, how does the economy look almost 5 months into Trump's second term?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jonathan. I think all of us predicted that inflation would start to go up as a result of those tariffs. But yesterday, there was a report that, in fact, it has really not yet gone up, or at least not yet gone up. So the Commerce Department reported that prices for all goods went up by 2.4, I should say the Labor Department, 2.4%. But for what we call core goods, which is you take out energy and other volatile categories like food, they went up 2.8%. And that, as you can see, is flat here and just slightly up here. So pretty good news on inflation. Why? I think people feel there are 3 reasons why we haven't seen the tariffs yet. First of all, importers stocked up in anticipation of those tariffs. Secondly, businesses are trying hard not to raise prices, although at some point I think we expect them to. And thirdly, the tariffs have been on and off and paused and so on. And so the effective tariff rate is actually at the moment a good bit lower than what Trump had put in place at the beginning. But economists still expect them to rise by about 3% this year, which means faster than that at the end of the year. And consumers actually expect them to go up 6.5%. Trump, as you know, has been posting on social media about how the Fed has to cut interest rates, the Fed has to cut interest rates. The Fed's target is 2%. They use a slightly different price index, but close enough. 2%.
Well, first of all, if there's going to be inflation, you should not raise, I'm sorry. If there's going to be inflation above the 2%, you should not cut rates because that would be inflationary. But I do think that these economists that are stating that we're going to have 3% inflation, I think are just wrong. I just flat out think they're wrong. I think that the actual effects of these tariffs is going to be just slightly, in some categories, slightly increases in prices. I wouldn't be surprised that we'd be at like the 2%. So the economists are saying that it's going to go up 3%, not to 3%, but up 3% above the 2% target. So we're going to have 5% inflation. That's what they're saying, according to that chart. It looks like that according to that chart. If I'm not mistaken here. Let me see. All right, expectations is at 6.5%. The Fed target is at 2%. All right. And I want to rewind what he said, because I want to understand if the economists are saying that it's going to go to 3%, so it's only going to be 1% above, or if it's going to be actually 5%. I just want to read here.
So the Commerce Department reported that prices for all goods went up by 2.4, I should say the Labor Department, 2.4%. But for what we call core goods, which is you take out energy and other volatile categories like food, they went up 2.8%. And that, as you can see, is flat here and just slightly up here. So pretty good news on inflation. Mm-hmm. Why? I think people feel there are 3 reasons why we haven't seen the tariffs yet. First of all, importers stocked up in anticipation of those tariffs. Secondly, businesses are trying hard not to raise prices, although at some point I think we expect them to. And thirdly, the tariffs have been on and off and paused and so on. And so the effective tariff rate is actually at the moment a good bit lower than what Trump had put in place at the beginning. But economists still expect them to rise by about 3% this year, which means faster than that at the end of the year. And consumers actually expect them.
All right, so the economists are saying that it's going to go slightly higher than the so the economists are basically saying it's going to increase by 6%, 0.6% more than what we're at right now. It's not that big of a deal.
Go up 6.5%. Trump, as you know,
that's where the problem is the expectation. So economists are saying it's going to be at 3%. Target it's at 2%. So it's going to be 1% over target. So we're listening to this huge tariff issue that's going to tank the economy over a 1% increase over the target by the economists. The economists always seems to be wrong. But the thing is that what's the difference is the expectation. They think it's going to be 6.5%. That's the household expectation. Well, if the expectation is higher, then by 4%, 4.5% actually. So if the expectation is at 6.5 minus the 2% target, it's above 4.5. All right. While the economists are saying it's only going to be 1% above target. So what's the big deal? That was the reason why I had to listen to this more closely.
Has been posting on social media about how the Fed has to cut interest rates. The Fed has to cut interest rates. The Fed's target is 2%. They use a slightly different price index, but close enough. 2% is what the Fed wants to cut interest rates. So there's a tug of war going on, right?
Right. So the economists are saying we're going to be at 3%. The Fed's saying we want to be at 2%. Expectations at 6.5%. So let me get this straight. Expectation usually when there's a little bit of a downturn in the economy usually overshoots. All right. So the economists are saying that the economy is going to tank because of a 1% above the target from the Federal Reserve. I don't think so. Don't worry about it.
Now between Trump and Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed. But let's look at another indication of what impact the tariffs may have this year. The World Bank, completely dispassionate, a neutral organization, put out its semi-annual forecast day before yesterday. And what did they do? They took down growth estimates for the U.S. pretty substantially. They had been projecting back in January 2.3%. Now they're down at 1.4%. It is more than worth noting that 1.4% is exactly half of the 2.8% that we achieved in the last year of the Biden administration. So the president who promised to, quote, revitalize the American economy is actually looking at a growth rate of half of what it was last year. And then the other noteworthy point is we may well be shooting ourselves in the foot because the World Bank only took down its estimates for Europe's growth rate, which is slower than ours, but they took it down by a much smaller share. And they didn't change China's growth rate at all. So they feel that China is going to work its way through these tariffs a lot better than we are.
That's such an important point about growth rate. We'll have more to say about tariffs in just a moment as we read from a Wall Street Journal editorial board take about Trump's tariff policy towards China, or lack thereof, really. So, Steve, let's move now to chart 2. Labor market slowing down.
Yeah, so we had an unemployment report last Friday, and the good news is the economy added a lot of jobs. The bad news is that the growth rate in jobs have been decelerating. Now, some of this was inevitable. This is out as we were coming out of COVID. This is a very, very high number of jobs that we were adding. And so it's natural that it would have come down. But now for the last several is actually below. This is the pre-pandemic average. So this is a kind of normal, stable economy, what we were adding. And this is what we've been adding over the last 12 months. There's one other interesting point about this, which is not on here, which is that 600,000 people dropped out of the labor force last month. That is a very big number. We don't know who they are. I don't know who they are, but it's not out of the question. This may have something to do with Trump's immigration policies. But consumers also have noticed the fact that the job market is weakening. If you look at the percentage who think jobs are plentiful, it's dropped to 32%. It was up here close to 60% as we came out of COVID. That's also obviously unnaturally high. But if you look even before COVID, the number of people who thought they were plentiful was about 45%. The people who think not so plentiful, obviously rising. And the people who say hard to get, 19%, also well above pre-COVID levels.
And Steve, another indicator of this.
But they said that the job openings are actually at a record high. They're having a hard time to filling these jobs. Now, on the other side of the coin is that entry-level positions are actually diminishing, partially because of not wanting to bring on staff. Another is this implementing artificial intelligence within their organization where they can reduce the actual number of tasks that are being done by the entry level.
economic uncertainty that just seems so pervasive is your third chart. Home buyers simply aren't biting.
Yeah, I think when you talk about those poll numbers you were showing earlier, things like the situation with jobs and then with houses play a factor in all this. So what's happened? It's really interesting because
I think most people aren't buying homes because of the interest rate.
the number, again, coming out of COVID, ignore all these wild fluctuations, but coming out of COVID, the number of buyers, the number of sellers was kind of in balance. Now look what's happened. The number of sellers has shot up to almost 2 million. The number of buyers has dropped to 1.5 million. And so you've got almost 500,000 houses sitting on the market waiting.
Mm-hmm. I think there's two reasons for that. One is that the higher interest rates for the mortgage. And the wealth effect 1 month ago, or almost a month and a half ago, because of the down part of the market, the downturn on the market, there's this negative wealth effect that is generated. So people are shy to actually purchase new homes. So I think that's a big part of the reason. Also, I think that there's an aging population that needs to dump their property now, and they want to downsize. So that's probably increasing the supply. And because the interest rates are so high, people aren't willing to take those mortgages.
Buyers. Now, why has that happened? Some of it is clearly economic uncertainty. Again, you go back to the Trump economic policies.
Well, the economic uncertainty is not so much the tariffs, it's the wealth effect. When the stock market goes up, people want to buy. When the stock market is down, which this data is reflecting, is when the market was down, then people will not want to buy because they're digging in. Because it was that sell-off. That sell-off, I got some static in my ear here. So that sell-off changed the behavior of people, especially with large purchases like homes. But I mean, the sell-off is almost self-corrected. It's mean reverted. It's at 6,019, and the all-time high was 6,130. So we're not that far away from an all-time high on the S&P 500. I think what's more problematic is not so much the tariffs, is how artificial intelligence is going to be used at the workforce, within the workforce and at the workplace.
Down, backwards, sideways. People do not want to make major purchases when they really have no idea where the country is going. So that's a factor. But the other factor is that what we call affordability, what an average consumer has to pay to afford his house, has been rising for a good while since we started raising interest rates coming out of COVID. So back here in 21, it was $1,000. Today, it's about $2,000. And so that is a significant impact on consumers. But Trump, who again came to office promising he was going to solve all these kinds of problems, what's happened? Since Election Day, it's gone from $2,100 up to almost $2,200. And on Liberation Day, it actually took a particularly large jump because the 30-year Treasury took a particularly large jump because of the tariffs. So we're going in the wrong direction on housing affordability at the moment, as well as consumers' willingness to make major purchases as we live.
He's only talking about $100 a month difference. Meanwhile, we're trying to build the economic clustering that was gutted for the last 35 years because of NAFTA and globalization.
In this world of economic uncertainty.
Yeah, lots of warning signs there. So,
oh, breaking news. It looks like there's one survivor recovered after the crash. Let's listen into GB News.
Tom, we're going to be continuing our coverage and of other matters into the afternoon. You're with Martin Dobney. He's going to be bringing you through till 6 o'clock, so stick with us here.
Okay, so they're on break. They're on break. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great structural nano silver soaps that I have. You can get it in charcoal tea tree. Oh, I'm sorry. This is lemongrass. You can get it in lemongrass. You can get it in peppermint. You can get it in charcoal tea tree and in lavender. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the high quality soaps that I have. Get a few bars for your household. Very high quality. It's stuff that I use. And it's a great way to support your health and wellness and support the work that I do. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality soaps that I have. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, let's see if we can find some more information about that survivor. While GB News is, yeah, that's really, so the Independent said there was no survivors, but now it seems like there is a survivor. Let's just listen into Fox News here.
And straight to this Fox News alert, an Air India plane bound for London crashing shortly after takeoff.
The Boeing 787 Dreamliner carrying at least 240 people going down in a residential area.
Let's get right to Greg Palcott live in London where the plane was heading. Greg, what do you know?
Yeah, folks, we're getting a little bit more information than since we last talked to you about 20 minutes ago from the Indian Health Ministry. They are now confirming that there are many, I repeat, many killed from this incident. Also, breakdown of the passengers. They include 11 children, and a report on the ground that some 30 bodies, 30 killed, were pulled from a building that was hit by the plane. It remains to be seen whether the individuals were actually killed inside the building or they were extracted from the plane. Again, a recap, this is a fine, perfect, safe airliner. It's a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. It has never had an accident since its inception in service in 2009. We understand the pilot, the Air India pilot of the plane, also has a very good record, about 11,000 hours in the sky. So on both points, that's clear. What is not clear is what happened shortly after he was taken off from the runway at the Ahmedabad city, that's in the western part of India, bound for London, bound for the second biggest airport here in the capital city, the Gatwick Airport, with 53 Brits on board, as well as 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian. Something happened. The landing gear was still down. Apparently, the pilots, the crew were desperately trying to fix something else. There was, we understand, a mayday call, so they knew that something was wrong. And then from the amateur video that we've been seeing, it's up in the air, and then it just floats down, and there is a large fireball where that occurs, crashing right into buildings. We understand, according to one report, crashed into a hostel for doctors, which is an interesting situation. That whole city, about 5 million people. So when you go down into a residential area, that is trouble. But that's what we have now. We do have confirmation of killed. We have seen visual confirmation that there appears to be injured being pulled from the plane as well. We'll come back to you with more information. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Greg. Let's bring in former NTSB investigator and aviation consultant, Mike Cofield. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning under these bad circumstances.
I know. Mike.
We lose the
video on social media. We're just getting it cleared to make sure it's actual footage from the plane crash. I'm sure you've seen some of that video. What do you think happened?
Well, I've seen the other video, and if that is factual, and I know that there's concern about that, but if that's factual, you're right. The gear was down. It appears that the flaps were already up, which is very strange. That would not be occurring with the gear still being down. And then the airplane appears to just, what we call it is behind the power curve. So it starts to just kind of sink. We're going to look at the black boxes at this point. We're going to make sure that the throttles were at full throttle. We're going to make sure too that the engines themselves didn't shut down. That also looked interesting. So that's the initial look. It's tragic in terms of the airplane was full of fuel. The likelihood of survivors is pretty limited. And it makes a global concern because of one, where it was going, and two, as member of the Star Alliance. There's a couple other things too that we want to look at also.
Quick question. When it comes to planes, we always focus on the pilot and the aircraft. What about the airports? I mean, what about the airports with their maintenance crew and their ability to detect any potential problems? Do we look at reputations there?
Absolutely. Brian, that's a great question. They'll start looking this morning at where the airplane has been, who touched it, and who was around it, and who had access to it. So that's maintenance, flight crews, caterers, and anyone else that might have been around the aircraft. As we all know, the tension between India and Pakistan has been high. They'll look at that. The president's briefing, he would not have gotten it this morning yet. Tulsi would have already received an update from the State Department Ops Center and also over at the Pentagon and Central Command. The president has probably now been briefed. I do know for a fact that Sean Duffy's been briefed this morning already. These are things that, and the Star Alliance deal is that United would have been involved in terms of their Ops Center has received the information. They're sending out notices to all the crews internationally this morning, check configuration, check safety, and check security. And that's reassuring for the American public.
So, Mike, we hear this all the time for those of us that travel, that they're doing a safety check before they take off. To complete a safety check and then a minute in, have the Mayday call, does that concern you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got about 22,000 hours with United. And so one of the things you do is you're using checklists, right? And the reason you use checklists is you want to make sure that you break any chains in the decision process that could lead to an accident. And so the checklist for taxi, the checklist for before takeoff, one of the items on the before takeoff checklist on all the Boeing products is flap configuration, right? So you're looking at that. You're looking at all the engine instruments. As you get on the runway and going down the runway, you're the first officer and the captain, and in this case, probably an international relief officer. They are looking at all the engine instruments. A Mayday right after takeoff is very concerning. And so on all those levels, maintenance, mechanics, who had access to the plane, and of course, they're going to look at the black box, which I believe they found one of them already. They'll request, the Indian government and the British government will request, because it's a Boeing product and because of...
Breaking news, UK economy shrinks by 0.3% in April.
The nature of the alliance between carriers, airlines, they'll ask the NTSB and Boeing to participate.
So, Mike, so many of us fly often, and we're concerned. We've seen all these crashes lately. What can you tell us about the planes that we're getting on? How old is the average plane, and how often do they have maintenance where they completely take it all apart and rebuild it?
So let me try to unpackage it. So every time the captain gets on the airplane, he does a walk around of the airplane. He's looking at everything on the outside, and then they get inside the cockpit and they're looking and doing testing of all of the internal process, and they run a diagnostic before the airplane even moves. Every night there's what's called a check, and then every so many hours or landings, or what they call cycles, the airplane is brought out of service, and it's either completely gone over where they actually go through the engines, take the engines off, all sorts of different diagnostics. So in the United States, and with airlines that are part of ICAO, which is the International Aviation Commercial Organization that we all participate in, they're looking at all these things this morning. And again, the good news for us here in the United States is that they're going to send out a notice to crews globally on the U.S. carriers this morning. They'll say, check configurations, check, do security and safety checks again, And that'll be really important. And of course, the U.S. government at state, Pentagon, and Tulsi at National Security Council, where I also work, they're gonna make sure that they're talking with their counterparts globally.
Got it. All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. We'll watch this unfold. Mike. Thanks, Mike.
All righty.
But first, the House and Senate chambers sparring over ways.
Let's listen into Bloomberg here.
The peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good Thursday morning from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live. Yes. You can find us on your smart TV. You just search Bloomberg Pursuits, and that's where you'll find us. Coming up, we're going to get the latest on these markets. We're going to check it with Shelley Bancho. She's Bloomberg Managing Editor for Global Business. She's going to give us the latest reporting we have here at Bloomberg News on this crash in India. Jeffrey Cleveland, Chief Economist at Payden and Regal, will get his thoughts on some of this economic data. Again, we got some PPI data today that kind of confirmed what we saw yesterday with the CPI, which is there's not a lot of inflation in this economy, at least not yet. So we'll get his thoughts there. Michael McKee. We'll get his thoughts on the economic outlook as well from Bloomberg Economics. Dan Ives is going to check in.
There seems to be 2 survivors now from the plane. Let's listen.
On the ground, this is the plane that's gone into a residential block. Could they be bodies from inside that block? What's the latest situation, Mark?
Well, we'd heard about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, Martin, some very ominous news from the police commissioner in Ahmedabad, who said that all indications were that there were no survivors from on board the 787 Dreamliner aircraft that was bound for Gatwick Airport when it went down. But now these reports coming through, it's reported by the ANI news agency, reputable news agency in India, and they've said in a news flash, indications that a survivor has been found at the crash site. Also, that a second survivor may have been found in the hospital. Now, that wouldn't be unusual because, of course, you've got chaotic scenes with many people injured on the ground there and people, caught up and killed both in the air and on the ground. So in that confused scenario, you can see how basically the emergency services, the ambulances there are just scooping up the injured and taking them straight off for treatment. But clearly they've got word from the hospital that they believe that one of the injured that they're treating is a survivor from the aircraft. We can only hope that that is true. It will be something that the families, including, of course, the families of the 53 British nationals on board this aircraft, will be clinging to any sign that there could be survivors, despite the rather pessimistic view of the police commissioner a little earlier, Martin.
Okay, so let's go back to Bloomberg. It looks like maybe there's 2 survivors.
And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Alex and Paul.
All right, happy Thursday, happy Friday Eve, everybody. Alex Steele alongside John Tucker and Paul Sweeney. All right, he's waving. Okay, so we got through the economic data. Yep. Let's take a look at some of the stocks in the move today. I'm Alex Steele with Paul Sweeney. We're joined now by Bloomberg's Isabel Lee. Got to start on Boeing. What's the latest and what's with the stock?
The stock is down 4.3%. That's the biggest decliner is an S&P 500. So again, of course, this comes after the fatal plane crash that killed more than 200 people. There were no reports of survivors. And the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was operated by Air India and bound for London. And it crashed shortly after taking off. And this is the worst disaster involving Boeing's most advanced twin-aisle aircraft. So shares of its suppliers, General Electric and Aerosystems, also down by more than 2%. And based on the number of people on board, this would be the worst commercial air crash since 2014, according to Aviation Safety Network. It's just really scary. And Boeing has had a string of accidents since 2018 and 2019.
Yep. You just kind of thought.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. It's a great foundational part of the health protocol. Another important foundational piece for the health protocol would be the multivitamin that we'll talk about later. I have 2 types of probiotics, the powdered version which is what I take, and the veggie cap version. Both are very high quality. Take it once a day. And by taking a good probiotic, you're improving your immune system. You're improving your gut ability to absorb nutrients. Your metabolism is going to be better. You're going to have better communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You're going to have less brain fog. You're going to actually sleep better. You'll be able to think more clearly. In addition, you're bringing down inflammation at the gut level. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. Also, when you have a good gut biome, your skin is improved. So again, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order.
Wow,
Yeah.
the AI thing, everybody's making.
Yeah, but it seems like it's the AI cloud infrastructure part now where a lot of the focus is being turned to. All right, let's go to Oxford. So Oxford makes the Tommy Bahama stuff, right? Lily Pulitzer.
Tommy Bahama, Lily Pulitzer, Southern Tide, the Bonnet Company, Duckhead, Johnny West, and Jack Rogers. None of them sound familiar to me, actually.
See, those are all
you know
in my
what?
wheelhouse.
I was like, you know
All in
what?
my
That's okay, Isabel. That's A-okay for
It's a
you.
Jersey Shore thing, dude.
Okay.
You just, I mean, you're going where tomorrow?
Yes.
India.
Oh, yeah, I'm
so
going to India.
That's not Tommy Bahama, I'm telling
Yeah, it's not. It's just summer
And
there.
you know what,
40
Paul,
degrees
you can keep
Celsius.
it there.
40 oh my.
Degrees
I'm
Celsius.
doing the
I don't
math
do
here in my
Fahrenheit.
head here. That's
Probably
a lot.
190.
Yeah.
Yikers. All right.
Okay,
Well,
so this stock, OXM.
oh, right. Let's get to that.
It's down by nearly 10%. The company slashed its profit forecast for the fiscal year. They reported EPS close to estimates and sales above estimates. So Truist said that they remain cautious on Oxford's outlook, especially given an uncertain second half of the year. Citi said it's not surprising that they cut guidance again due to tariff, and especially considering the company's exposure to China. I feel like this is the reason over and over again for companies.
All right, Isabel, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Bloomberg's Isabel Lee. For more conversations just like this, subscribe to our new Stock Movers reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports and the biggest.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And the other foundational piece for your health protocol is the multivitamin. Multivitamins are very important. They're cofactors for enzymatic activity. So this multivitamin is easy to digest. Take this every day, drink it with filtered water, and build off of it. Add the probiotics and some of the other supplements that I'll be talking about later to help improve your health. But this has vitamin A and D3 and the B vitamins and folate and manganese, many others. So please go to my store, take this multivitamin, add it to your health stack, and slow down that aging process. Again, there is the foundation. The foundation is the multivitamins and the probiotics. And then you add to it, especially like the core, what I call the core, which is max 35 or max 14 or cleanse to boost up the immune system, C60 to soak up free radicals, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to improve your immune system and help with your cardiovascular health, and Boomer Boost to boost up that energy level and rev up your metabolism. So when you stack these together, you're going to start to notice, especially when you do this over a period of time, that you're having more vitality and you're slowing down the aging process. Your immune system gets better, your endocrine system gets better, you're sleeping better, you just have more vitality. And by applying a holistic approach, by proper diet and exercise, proper sleep, learning new things, all these work together to slow down the aging process. It's not just taking a multivitamin that helps your health, right? It does help your health, but you get much more benefits when you look at this and approach this in a holistic fashion and you stack things accordingly. And by stacking them accordingly, what will happen is you're going to be able to target certain systems, neural health or cardiovascular health or gut health, skin, right? So immune system, these are all, they can all be targeted, right? But a holistic approach is the best way to slow down this aging process. And when you're slowing down this aging process, you're going to have more energy. And when you have more energy, you just have more vitality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin.
Don't know yet. That's what we're trying to find out now. If a plane is maintained, fine. If a plane is maintained well, 12 years is fine. If it's not, then it could be a problem.
And that's another thing George Ferguson was saying. Tom Keane asked him, is plane maintenance kind of the same all around the world, the quality? And George says it's not, and so there are certain things. And so somehow how the Boeing will then come involved periodically to make sure it's up to speed and things like that. So there's a lot of checks in there, but things happen. What's the next? What are we looking for? Yeah. What are you looking forward to next, Shelley, on this?
Yeah. So first of all, on the death count, I mean, we know so far they found or identified about 200 bodies. There's probably going to be more. There were 242 people on board, but from what we understand from reports, this went right into a medical school where people were sitting and having lunch. So the death count could get much higher. We still don't know. A lot of rubble. They're trying to pick people out. Then we have the cause. What we want to find out is, why did this happen? So that's going to require, is this a Boeing issue? Is this a GE engine issue? Is this an Air India issue? The answer to that could then, determine where the story goes from here.
Unbelievable. And that's sort of the scary part, is there's so many different layers.
And I saw some reporting that the pilot had just tons of experience.
Right, because he knew right away, from what I understand.
Yeah,
and he radioed air control. Yep. Okay, well, we will obviously be keeping you updated on any headlines as they cross, as this continues to unfold in the coming days and coming weeks. Shelley, thank you very much. Shelley Banjo is Bloomberg's managing editor for global business. Again, looking at shares of Boeing, down almost 4% after the Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner crash shortly after takeoff. Just looking at those suppliers as well, looking at General Electric and Spirit Aerosystems, which of course Boeing is trying to buy, except for the part that is going to be dealing with Airbus. The plane was powered with those two GE engines.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the, the stock of Boeing. It's up 16% year to date, up about 13% on a trailing 12-month basis. It kind of had seemed like they were beginning to put from at least the stock price performance perspective, they were putting some of their troubles from the last several years.
Right, like the worst was in, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And because I always kept saying to analysts, boy, it just feels like the time to go in and buy this thing. It can't get any worse. They've seen it all.
I would stay away from airline companies and makers of airships. So let's talk about oil for a second. It's trading at 67.57, and we have new resistance and support levels. 65 is going to be the new support level. 68.50 is a resistance level. Right now we're trading at 67.61. So it's probably near the high point of the trading range. And so what I've been doing is accumulating positions that are shorting the oil market. So I think that we're near a high end of the trading range for this. Now, the reason for the big jump from 65 to the high 67 handle is supposedly in the news, escalated tensions in the Middle East. I'm not so sure about that. When you look at the actual fib sequence, there is a big gap between the retracement line, right, where 68.5 is a resistance level, and that 60 and that 65 level, there's nothing there in terms of support or resistance, or right. So usually when there's a big gap between prices, especially in volatile commodities like oil, it can move quickly up or down. So I just think that this is a momentum play that coincides with some tension in the Middle East with Iran, because this was tied to this big jump up seemed to coincide with families and certain personnel at the embassies in Iraq leaving right? And so there's, a little bit of talk of escalated tensions. Maybe the United States is going to hit Iran, maybe Israel will hit Iran. So, I'm not so sure that this is going to continue to play out. I wouldn't be surprised that oil drops back down to around 66 or 65. So I think that as it approaches that 68.50, I think it's going to have a little bit of hard time get above that. So my targets now are 68.50 for the resistance and 65 for the support. Now, this coincides with also OPEC saying that they're increasing production. According to Petrol Logistics, they think that OPEC Plus is just hiding production numbers that were elevated in prior periods. The official data that was coming out from OPEC Plus several periods ago seemed to be understating the actual production compared to the shipping containers of oil that Petrol Logistics is tracking. I believe that's the data set that they're tracking. So it just seemed like there was more oil floating around being shipped than what OPEC Plus was saying. So by elevating to 400 plus thousand barrels a day more month over month, it slowly allows them to kind of hide this overproduction that they did prior months ago. So that means that the real inventories have not changed. Now the question is, will those inventories go down or rise because of demand? China doesn't seem to be too healthy, so I don't think that the demand for oil is going to be there. And there's still a debate about how globally this tariff war, how it may suppress certain regions. Now, the UK, the economy is shrinking. Europe's not doing so well. So I'm not so sure that it can justify in the Brent crude market $70 or plus a barrel of oil. So I think it'll go down. The Brent crude should be going down. Last night it was trading at 70 something. I don't know what it's trading at right now because I think Brent crude is probably trading still in the 70s, probably 70 something. No, Brent crude is now at 69.13. But the point I'm making here is that it just seems a little high. It just seems a little high for right now, based on the current dynamics. So I wouldn't be surprised that we see, at least in the WTI, this trading range between 65 and 68.5. But we're right now at 67.50. So it just seems that there's higher probability of it going down than up. So that's my take on oil at this moment in time. We'll see, things evolve. But if there is a ramp up in escalation in the Middle East, it could stay elevated for a little while. But I just don't see it happening. It just seems like it climbed up too quickly. Plus, when you look at an RSI, it's starting to look a little high for the RSI, the relative strength index. So it's probably going to come back down.
PI out today. John characterized it as muted. I'll go with that. PPI final demand month to month, 0.1%. Consensus was 0.2%. And then if you annualize all this stuff and say PPI X food, energy, and trade year over year came in at 2.7%. Consensus was 3%. So that's a pretty big beat, I would say. Jeffrey Cleveland joins us, chief economist at Peyton & Regal out there in L.A. Jeffrey, what did you make of yesterday's CPI, today's PPI? What's your call on inflation these days?
Well, Paul, not only was it benign for May, that's 4 months in a row. So 4 months in a row after, a January hot start to the year, CPI has been soft. I know the inflationistas listening are going to say that, just wait another month and the tariff toll will hit. And that is possible. But I would point out that in the data we saw yesterday, it wasn't just that goods prices were soft, also services prices were soft. So,
So,
housing,
Jeffrey, are we all clear?
but also non-housing service. I wouldn't say they're all clear, Alex, but I mean, it's we're getting there. We're getting close to saying all clear. I think another couple of months, I'll declare the all clear. I think also with this morning's PPI, you throw that in the mix, you can imagine a soft reading for core PCE when it comes out at the end of this month, which is what the Fed is more focused on. And I think very good news for the central bank and for the bond market. So soft inflation readings.
So Jeff, we're not necessarily seeing any inflation in the numbers yet. Maybe we will in the future. Is that a reflection of companies just kind of eating the cost increases that they are experiencing, maybe taking it in their margin as opposed to passing them along to consumers?
That's a possibility, Paul. It's possible we just haven't seen the pass through yet. People are shifting their behaviors. People are making up for it in other ways and not passing it through into prices. I think all of those are in the mix. I think for one thing we've been telling clients is that keep in mind imported goods in terms of the PCE index are 6, 7, 8% of the index. So you could see potential price increases on those goods, but you have to keep in mind most of what you spend your money on, Paul, are things like services. And those, we still see scope for services to continue to cool off. And certainly we saw that in May. So that could outweigh some of the tariff price increase. So that's a good news. So I think by the end of the year, so if you can look out 6 months or so, I think inflation will continue to moderate.
Okay, so if we are in this disinflationary environment right now, well, actually, would you categorize this as disinflation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we peaked in 2022 at a very high level on core inflation. It's been coming down. It's been coming down slower than we would have hoped, but it is disinflating. So I think we're definitely in a disinflationary environment right now. Yes.
So if it's disinflationary, is that enough for the Fed to cut in July, September, preemptively?
I think you have to step back here. If you put yourselves in the shoes of the Fed, you're at 450 on the funds rate. I would categorize that, Alex, as restrictive. So they have a restrictive policy setting, but we know, we just talked about it, inflation is cooling, disinflation. And the other thing that you brought up earlier on a segment, which was wonderful, we are seeing a slowdown in the labor market. So with that backdrop, I think the next move from the Fed is a cut. The question is, when are they comfortable doing that? I don't think it's likely next week, but I think the market should start pricing in July, should start entertaining July. But we think by September, guys, we'll have some evidence enough where they could possibly cut.
If that's the scenario and inflation, is not necessarily a concern here or a big concern, what does that do to your GDP outlook for the remainder of this year?
We cut our GDP, Paul, after the tariff turmoil really broke out starting February 2nd. That Sunday afternoon, my team got together and we cut our GDP. So we went down to 1% for 2025, Q4 to Q4. We brought that actually up a little bit in recent weeks. So we're around 1.5% for the year. That's not a recession, Paul. I would characterize that as subpar economic growth, so sub-trend. But that doesn't really change here with this disinflation story. I think that will be the case. We'll have subpar growth. We'll avoid a recession, but we'll have disinflation. That's good for bonds. I think especially the long end of the Treasury market is really been pushed up by fears of the fiscal, fears of inflation from tariffs. And if all of that sort of fades, man, bonds look good. We have a good setup here for the bond market over the second half of the year, in my view. Really?
Deficits included in that?
Yeah, I mean, the deficits, Alex, this is the most widely known story on earth. Talking to global clients for years, they've been looking at the U.S. budget deficit. It's huge. I'm not denying that, 6 or 7% of GDP. I don't think that's going to change next year with the big, beautiful budget bill. But I think that's priced in. We see that in, I think, the slope of the curve in term premium that's been built into 10s and 30-year treasuries. So that's a known. I think as we move on beyond that, people are going to realize the real story here is, okay, what happens with growth and what happens with inflation? That will drive markets.
Hey, Jeffrey, I know you're in LA. You're an LA guy. Give us a sense of what's happening out there.
Well, I'm 25 miles from downtown LA today, as you can see here in the home office. Part of that is because Peyton & Regal offices are, in the heart of it, downtown Los Angeles, which enjoyed such a great resurgence pre-COVID. It was a renaissance, if you will. People living and working down there. So the events that we've seen in the last week or so, really unfortunate, causing a lot of uncertainty here on the West Coast. I think as far as it pertains to the economic data, I mean, the big thing we're watching here, Paul, is the labor force. You saw that actually in the May jobs report. Labor force participation went down. We like to look at the labor force flows. So every month you can look at the number of people that are going from being employed, for example, to out of the labor force. And in May, that number was the biggest increase that we've seen outside of COVID in the last 20, 25 years. It could be retirements. It could be people leaving the labor force for reasons other, than work-related, maybe family-related reasons, but it could also be related to the immigration issues. So I think we need to keep an eye on that, because the labor force participation is a key part of economic growth.
Let me get this straight. We're worried about the economy going to hell and that the Federal Reserve needs to lower rates because illegal immigrants are here and they're contributing to the economy. This is just slave labor.
CPI data yesterday, the PPI data today, I'm like, I'm not seeing any inflation out there. Is this just a timing thing? Do we need to be patient? Or is there something else going on in the economy that may be mitigating some of the tariff-related inflationary pressures?
There's a little bit of all of that in there. The biggest thing is the tariffs haven't really hit yet. Most of them were paused by the president. In areas where we have had tariffs, like steel, we did see in the PPI today a 7.1% rise in steel prices last month. So there are sectors affected by tariffs where tariffs are leaking through. In the CPI, washing machines went up over 4%. So, there
looks like one of the survivors is a British national from the plane crash.
But the tariffs are before we get the tariff effects. Interesting note, speaking of Donald Trump and not knowing what he's doing, Jeff Cleveland was just talking about the labor force flows, and especially out in California. I don't know if you saw this tweet a few minutes ago from Donald Trump about the farmers complaining that the deportation policy is taking a lot of workers away from them, and it seems to be getting on the president's agenda. And he says changes are coming. So I don't know what that means, but I'm sure that people in many agricultural communities are worried because it's the undocumented people who come in and do all the work in the fields, and those people, as I understand it, have started to disappear because they don't want to be disappeared.
To that point, when we saw the continuing jobless claims increase, so basically people who are unemployed are having a harder time getting jobs, why? Like, is there a sector breakdown?
No, there's not a sector breakdown, but what we're seeing is general reluctance by companies to do anything.
Oh, I see.
They're not. It's not that they're letting people go in vast numbers, and they're definitely not hiring. They're waiting because they don't know either, and that's what you get from all the Fed officials that you talk to or I talk to these days. Is they're relying on what companies are telling them they're doing, which is basically just sitting and waiting for some sort of guidance on which way the administration is going to go. If Trump takes off all the tariffs and they lighten up now on the immigration thing, then maybe the economy starts to rebound and people feel better about it and companies go back to investing. Otherwise, they might start laying people off, figuring demand is going to slow.
And the jobless claims, 248, is that getting to a level that gets your attention at all? Or we just,
it would be if we thought that that was an ongoing process. The problem is this is a time of year when it's really hard to seasonally adjust for jobless claims because the dates of the things that happened, like Memorial Day, and then when school gets out, move around. And this is a time of year when a lot of people who work in schools, not teachers so much, but all the support people, they get laid off because it's the end of the school year, and so they can go file for jobless claims. And so the Department of Labor knows this, and they try to adjust for it, but they can't get it exactly right.
I see.
But we haven't seen a big spike. We saw it go up, and then it stayed that way. If it goes much higher, then you would start to worry.
All right, Mike. Always appreciate it. Michael McKee, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy Correspondent, joining us there. And just taking a look at what's happening in the bond market, we are off. The bid is strong, but not as strong as it was, is what I mean. The 2-year yield is now down only 4 basis points. You got the 10-year down by about 3.7 basis points there. So what that winds up meaning then for the Fed, as Jeffrey Cleveland was talking about, he thinks that they should go ahead and cut, that the disinflationary trend could stay. This is Bloomberg.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer, and follow the stack and the way I'm taking these. I take these supplements every day. Clarity Factor gets rid of that brain fog. It also helps support your memory. Now, by taking this every day, you're going to be able to concentrate on tasks, either in school or at work, or even if you're retired. Drink it with filtered water, but also do a holistic approach with this. That is, eat properly, drink the filtered water, stay away from processed foods, reduce your sugar intake, detoxify your body, get proper sleep, do the 4 modalities of exercise, which are weight training, cardio, balancing, and stretching exercises. Learn new things, talk to people, read and write. Those are really important. Stay away from screens. Try to reduce your screen time, all right? And by doing that, you're going to improve your neural health. So please go to my store, get the Clarity Factor. This is super important to take every day. It helps support your neurons, and it gets rid of that brain fog. And getting those neurons to fire regularly is going to improve your neuroplasticity. It's going to, what I call positive neuroplasticity, it's going to increase dendritic connections. Your neurons are going to communicate more easily, and therefore your memory is better, your recall is better, your cognitive function's better, even your kinematics are better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. But also what's important, not just neural health, but vascular health. They're connected. Because if you have good blood flow, you're going to have the good microenvironment for the neuroplasticity. This positive neuroplasticity I'm talking about. If you have poor blood flow, your neurons are going to die. All right. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the supplements that help with cardiovascular health. And again, exercise is super important. Resistance training, cardio, balancing, and stretching exercises. All 4 modalities are very important. Take omega-3. Omega-3 is a supplement that will help to bring down systemic inflammation, help to reduce overclotting. It reduces the stickiness of the red blood cells. And it will help to improve your lipid profile by bringing down LDL levels and increasing your HDL levels. When that happens, you're reducing the chances of LDL being oxidized. Oxidized LDL helps to form plaque. You don't want that. You want less oxidized LDL. How plaque forms is that there's inflammation at the vascular level, eventually causing damage at the intima of the blood vessel. And then what happens is you have LDL that gets in to the media, the middle part of your blood vessel, and is oxidized by free radicals. That oxidized LDL is eaten up by a macrophage. That macrophage then switches into a foam cell. That foam cell hardens and ends up being plaque. If you reduce inflammation, reduce LDL, reduce free radicals, you reduce plaque formation. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Take it every day. And again, it's a holistic approach. So please go to my store, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The major stock averages right now mixed a little change. Bond yields, they're pushing lower, the dollar falling. Oracle right now, the leading technology share for protecting cloud infrastructure sales are going to jump more than 17%. Also, the best performing stock in the S&P 500 shares up close to 14% right now. After the Air India crash, Boeing shares worst performing stock in the S&P 500. They are down 5%. And the maker of the engines on that aircraft, General Electric, those shares right now down 1.7%. The Treasuries selling $22 billion of 30-year bonds this afternoon. This auction comes as Double Line Capital's Jeffrey Gundlach warns the long bond has lost its haven status.
The long-term Treasury bond is not a legitimate flight to quality asset. It's not responding to lower interest rates. It's not really responding to an inflation rate, which is now 2.5%.
Gundlach telling Bloomberg a reckoning is coming. Surprisingly poor reception for last month's 20-year auction that contributed to the bond sell-off that pushed 30-year rates as high as 5.15. Right now, the long bond is at 4.87. That's down about 4 basis points. S&P 500 up 16 points at 6,039 in the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 25 points, and the NASDAQ 100 57 points higher. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul.
All right. Thanks so much, JT. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news in business, economics, and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies in 130 industries all around the world. All right, let's check in with one of the best technology analysts out there, Dan Ives, Global Head of Technology Research over at Wedbush Securities. He joins us now. So the latest is that Elon Musk has an apology tour now. Reportedly, he spoke to President Trump. He said he overdid it. He posted on social media. Does this calm down Tesla?
I mean, look, that was the overhang, right? I mean, you don't want a BFF to turn into an enemy, especially when they're in the Oval Office. And I think it was a smart move. I mean, obviously, hotheads, things got a little wild. But I continue to believe Trump and Musk will be friends again. And Trump's a supporter of Tesla when it comes to ultimately the autonomous vision. And that continues to be key around robotaxi.
Yeah, let's go to robotaxi, Dan. Can you tell us kind of the timing around it, the market opportunity around it, the competitive nature? What do we need to know about the robotaxi business?
Yeah, I mean, and that'll be late next week. It looks like when it's actually, going to launch, or and maybe potentially June 22nd. But this is in Austin. This is going to be a small launch, but it's the start of what's going to be 20 to 25 cities around the country in terms of basically a Waymo-like vehicle that Tesla is going to be able to scale and scope that's going to be unmatched. I think it's going to start, obviously, in a more of a ring-fenced, small area in Austin. But this is the beginning. We believe it is worth $1 trillion to the story in terms of the autonomous vision. And I continue to view this as probably, not just one of the best AI players out there, but probably the most undervalued AI relative to the technology I see at Tesla.
But aren't there better ways or less stressful ways to play AI where you don't have a key man risk overhang?
Yeah, and now, I mean, our view is it's the Ives AI 30, right? It's in terms of the report. Yeah, this is the autonomous way. Akko is the nuclear way. The godfather of AI, Jensen NVIDIA on the semis. Hyperscalers, Palantir, obviously one of the best pure plays. There's different ways to play it, but in my view, you can't just play it on semis. You can't just play on software. You have to play the whole theme. And I think when it comes to autonomous, Tesla continues to be the best way to play it.
So broadening out a little bit, Dan, U.S.-China, we had some news come out from President Trump about maybe after the London negotiations between the U.S. and China on trade. Still, we're sitting there with, I don't know, on China, the best I can read is still 55% tariffs. That's still a big, big deal. How do tech companies like an Apple, how do they deal with that?
I mean, I think also investors are viewing this 55% is probably the start. I mean, I think there's a view that's going to come down. I think that's how the market's reading it as more negotiations come out. And I think there's going to be a lot of loopholes and a lot of exceptions. I think when it comes to tech, they're going to have to play both sides of the fence in terms of pivoting like Apple to India. But when it comes to NVIDIA and Jensen, I think that's the next big thing everyone's waiting for. What does this mean in terms of export controls? And will NVIDIA in some way be able to sell into China instead of handing that business to Huawei on a silver platter?
So Dan, what else are you looking at? Like, okay, so we got through all the earnings. We got through Oracle yesterday, right? We got through the Musk and Elon, the Musk and Trump disaster. What is next on your radar? What's going to be a catalyst for your industry?
I mean, to me, it's all about the use cases, expanding on enterprise, and that's key. The hyperscalers, the Oracles, of course, the semi plays as well. You're going to be looking out for they're loosening on the export controls in NVIDIA, and that's important, especially around China. But I think the big thing is now the consumer piece that's going to play out, from Meta to what I view as really autonomous to robotics. I mean, that's the golden goose is physical AI. I think autonomous and robotics are going to be probably the biggest theme within AI. So to me, investors continue to kind of, I think where they're wrong, they continue to be skeptical about AI. I don't think there's any skepticism out there. I mean, you spend all of our time traveling around the world. This is a fourth industrial revolution. It's why I believe we're going to be talking about NASDAQ 20,000, NASDAQ 25,000, and so on over the coming years.
So Dan, when we think about AI, one of the question marks in your world, Dan, and the world that touches almost everybody out there, a couple billion people, is Apple. I'm wondering, is an acqui-hire, which is something Apple historically has not done, or at least in scale, I kind of feel, I'm probably like a lot of your clients, I feel like they're kind of missing the boat here, and I keep waiting for them to jump on here, and they don't seem to have been. What's your call there in Apple?
I mean, look, you could call it a snooze fest, in terms of Monday. I mean, it was a little time warp back to 2018, right? So, I mean, right now they're in the right lane going 45 miles an hour. Every other big tech player is going 100 miles an hour left lane. It's my view, like acquisitions are going to have to do, even though they historically haven't done it. But I think it was clear on Monday, we walked out of there for the first time coming out of Apple Park, kind of shrugged the shoulders.
Okay, sorry, I was getting distracted by your hat. So for those of you who are on radio, usually we're used to like Dan's really loud colors and jackets and stuff. But you have a hat. What does it say? Epic.
Oh, I mean, epic. Now it could be used to describe Sweeney as epic or AI.
Back in the day.
You could use it in a few different ways.
Okay, that feels important as Dan Ives does stock analysis from a car, which
exactly. We've done it all. I remember doing it first with the BlackBerry, driving between meetings in like Minneapolis and stuff like that. That was way back in the day. Dan Ives, thanks for joining us. Appreciate getting a couple minutes of your time. Dan Ives, Global Head of Technology Research at Wedbush Securities. Of course, we all believe that Dan Ives peaked when he was a student at Penn State, Happy Valley.
No,
and
he's
it's been
an
all
ETF
down.
now.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, come on. Maybe that's his peak, though.
Exactly.
At the end of the day. In the markets, it really is about the dollar today, it feels, falling to its weakest level in about 3 years. But then you wonder, do you wind up getting analyst calls for equity markets being like, hey, that's actually good for company earnings?
Yeah, I know. And it's interesting because we haven't seen this. And some FX people we had on today said, don't worry about it. And a 9 or 10% pullback in the dollars, it happens. And maybe it's part of it's just selling off because one could argue it was overvalued coming into all the euphoria of the beginning of the year and the new presidency. So that maybe this is healthy. And others are suggesting, no, this is structural. This is the market telling you something.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like when you get cyclicality that then transforms into structural. And so does it mean that all of a sudden the dollar's toast? Well, no. But can the dollar sustainably then be down 10, 15%? And if that's the case, then what winds up happening to other markets, to earnings, to other FX? What does Japan wind up doing with that? Can the Europe capitalize on that? Does the Europe want a structurally higher euro?
I'm going over to Italy in the fall, and I got the euro 115 is crushing.
You remember when the euro was like, was it over 2 or was it the pound?
I can't.
But either way.
I still have Deutschmarks in my drawer, so coming up, Nathan Dean, we're talking some policy stuff. This is Bloomberg.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer. The S&P 500 is at 6,039. VIX is trading at 1744. Euro is trading at 115. Oil is trading at 67.57. BITO is trading at 21.57. Japanese yen is trading at 143. Natural gas is trading at 3.5. Now let's talk about two supplements that are really important for your immune system and also brain function. Magnesium and zinc, very important for our immune system. Drink it with filtered water. But magnesium also helps the efficacy of D3, vitamin D3. So vitamin D3 will perform better when you have magnesium in your supplementation or in your diet. And magnesium and zinc, that just brings up that immune system. But magnesium helps with brain function. Super important. And again, you start turning age 40 or you're older, you need to start taking care of your brain function. We're going to see a lot of people in our circle of social networks, right? Where people are going to have neurological problems in the next 5 to 10 years, all right? Part of it's due to aging, part of it's due to environment, and some other factors. So it's very important to start protecting your neurons. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with the immune system, helps with skin. Vitamin C is very important for skin health. And magnesium helps with brain function. So stack with the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium, you're helping with your brain, your skin, and your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
Listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney. We are live here in a Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. We are streaming live on YouTube as well. All right, I'm looking at some Bloomberg reporting here. President Donald Trump says he intended to send letters to trading partners in the next 1 to 2 weeks, setting unilateral tariff rates ahead of a July 9th deadline to reimpose higher duties on dozens of economies. So sending out letters, I'm not sure what that means, but I guess, do I watch my...
Dear sir or ma'am.
Exactly. To whom it may concern, we're raising your things. Nathan Dean, he knows stuff because we pay him to know this stuff. Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence, Senior Policy Analyst. Nathan, just give us your latest kind of overview of where we are on these tariffs here, a little, I guess, context.
Yeah, what I would say is there's really two phrases we're saying at the moment. The first is uncertainty. And look, if you're in the markets, this isn't a new word. You know that uncertainty is the word for 2025. But I would also use the phrase status quo, because even though President Trump said yesterday that he's going to send those letters out, and for what it's worth, that's a much easier way than going to the Rose Garden and holding up a little card that says here what the new tariff rates. You know, I think what we're going to see is we saw some reporting from Bloomberg News just last night that President Trump was also talking about extending this. So I think the current idea here is that you're going to have a situation where you have President Trump going out there and making threats or making statements that raises headline risk. But subsequently, you're also going to have this idea that we're just going to try and keep the status quo because we don't want to rock the markets. And so I think you are going to see some examples. I think President Trump may pick on a couple of countries or the European Union in particular to try and raise a renewed threat or a headline risk in order to spur negotiations. But I think for the next 3 to 6 months, the markets are going to face this status quo of a 10% baseline plus an extension or plus an exemption or plus a certain additional threshold like we saw with the China agreement, and that should probably stick through the third quarter.
Are these agreements, and really we're just looking at China and the UK, are they actually different, or are they just kind of circling back to where we were before all of this trauma unfolded here?
Well, so the China one is mostly status quo from where we were before, but the UK agreement was different because the United Kingdom didn't have a trade deficit with the United States like other certain countries do. So the base case scenario that you should be looking at is a 10% minimum tariff on every country. I mean, look, we heard Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent say if they don't have any trade, tariffs on us, we're not going to have tariffs on them. But this idea of a 10% baseline is something that's usually sticking around at the White House. But then you're also going to see exemptions. For example, automobiles, technology, anybody that can get into the White House is going to be pushing for President Trump to offer exemptions. And we just go back to this idea that if you are going to see sectors that impact consumer prices, so think of things like Apple MacBooks or Amazon or Walmart, like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was just getting pushed about in the Senate Finance Committee, then you are going to see exemptions, but then there are going to be additional tariffs for other countries. But we should say that a lot of this depends on negotiations. Bloomberg News reported just 20 minutes ago that Prime Minister Mark Carney said the U.S.-Canada is going well. They reported last night that negotiations with India weren't going so well. So that idea for examples to be made before July 9th could come about.
Okay, I guess we just keep in touch with him.
I hear some skepticism from Paul at this moment.
It feels like we're going to get to a spot kind of where we did last time, which is at the end of the day, it's a lot about nothing. And I think the markets, certainly the equity markets, might be pricing that in with the rebound here. All right, Nathan, for the adults in the room here, what's the next thing from DC we should be focusing on here?
So the number one question we've been getting from our clients just this morning is when is the Senate Finance Committee going to release its legislation or its text of President Trump's one big beautiful bill? So if you're an equity investor and you're exposed to the solar industry or the wind industry, this is very important to you because Senator Crapo just last night was saying that things like certain tax credits should be phased out earlier. And we think he was hitting at solar and wind, and others would be extended, which was nuclear and geothermal. Now, obviously, we're still waiting for that text. Now, I think that text is going to come after market close on Friday. I think it's going to come Saturday or Sunday, but keep your eyes out because there is this potential for some, I used to say marijuana stocks have hot sauce. Now I say the solar stocks, they have hot sauce. So these things move around. So definitely keep your eyes out for that. That's probably the next major catalyst you're going to see coming from Washington.
Is that is hot sauce reference is a good thing or a bad thing? Or just spicy? Just stuff happening?
Just spicy. I stole it from our friends over in the ETF space.
Okay, no, fair enough. Because the solar sector is just really in a mess based on when the tax credits land when it comes out of the Senate. Do you think the timeline still works?
I do. I think, obviously the senators want to have all this legislation out in the public arena before Juneteenth next week. They're going away for a couple of days. And I think the Senate can eventually get there. They seem to be a little bit more, I'd say, on board. There were still major questions about the deficit, getting the Rand Pauls on the debt ceiling and, the other senators, Ron Johnson's, if you will, on board. But I think they can get there by the 4th of July or maybe even after the 4th of July. We still are thinking an 80% chance this gets done before the August recess.
All right. I mean, those recesses are actually a good incentive to get stuff
like
done.
Deadlines.
Yes. So it's good. All right, Nathan. Appreciate it as always, Nathan Dean. He is our go-to person in DC to explain all the craziness down there in terms of the policies. Nathan Dean, senior policy analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence. He's down in our DC bureau. And again, we're going to get some tariff discussions continuing. And it's all about the big, beautiful tax bill, or will it be something different coming out of the Senate when they send it back to the House? So a lot going on. For our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM Channel 121. Access the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio on Sirius XM Channel 121 is presented by ShipStation. Stay with us. Your top stories and global business headlines are coming up right now. The market's showing a little bit of red, a little bit of green, a lot of odd direction in the equity markets. Yields coming in. This is Bloomberg.
Zapita Khalil is. I'm sure you'll tell me there's many cases, whether they're
These are high-profile cases. New Yorkers know about them, and you don't. So let's talk about Sebastian Zapita Khalil. Do you know who that is?
This is Hochul being drilled by
I don't have the specific details at my
Stefanik.
disposal, no.
Well, this is an illegal migrant in New York because of your sanctuary state policies. Do you know what crime he committed?
I'm not familiar at this moment.
I bet you're going to be familiar when I remind you. He found a sleeping woman on the subway, lit her on fire, and burned her alive. This is in Kathy Hochul's New York. And as I'm sure you are aware, and I'll remind you, that ICE issued an order to detain this violent criminal, but that was rejected by New York officials due to sanctuary state laws. Now, do you know who Raymond Rojas Basilio is?
I just want to say this. These crimes are horrific.
Because of your sanctuary state policies.
In all of these cases, we would work with ICE to remove
You did
them.
not in this case. They are walking on the streets because of your policies and your executive order that you signed 3 times. Now, Raymond Rojas Basilio, do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. I will explain to you the policies of New York. We cooperate with, I know you're just
do not. Specifically, ICE was told not to detain this individual, and he burned a woman alive on the New York subways in Kathy Hochul's New York. So I will keep on going. What about Raymond Rojas Basilio? Do you know who that is?
I'm going to tell you our overall policy, which will address all this.
I'll tell you who that is. He is an illegal who molested an 11-year-old in our state because, again, of your sanctuary state policies. This illegal was shielded from federal immigration enforcement and able to commit this heinous crime. And what about Wilson Castillo Diaz? Do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. We do cooperate fully with ICE in criminal prosecution. Our sanctuary
You're not advocating for these victims.
Only deal
this
with
is a 5-year-old who was raped on Long Island in Nassau County. You are not advocating on behalf of these victims. You are shielding illegals. Even in your opening statement, you prioritize putting illegals first.
That is not
Rapes of young girls, beatings of NYPD cops by illegals who are here under Kathy Hochul's failed policies, burning New Yorkers alive. This is Kathy Hochul's New York. It's one of the many reasons why you're hemorrhaging support from hardworking New York
These are
families.
horrific crimes, and they're heartbreaking.
They're horrific crimes that are committed on your watch. You signed this executive order on your first day in office. You signed it again and again this January. We deserve a governor who stands up for law-abiding New Yorkers, doesn't put illegals first, but actually puts New Yorkers first. I appreciate
rather than going after the viral moment. I suggest you
No. I'm standing up for New Yorkers. No. Rather than addressing the illegals in New York, you're prioritizing your far-left sanctuary state policies, which you put in place with executive orders. Instead of advocating for victims, a 5-year-old who was raped, you did not. They were released because of sanctuary state policies in New York State. No amount of words is going to clean up your failed record and these horrific crimes committed in sanctuary state that you created. And with that, I yield back.
Representation, the facts,
Gentlelady
absolutely false.
Yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be real. Since the start of the Trump administration, each day has been more nightmarish.
I'll tell you, Hochul is just a retard. And the only reason why she ended up getting into office was because Cuomo was thrown out. And, you know, she has ruined the city, but also the state of New York, because she's the governor, for the ones that don't know. And her policies are so left-wing. But AOC is more left of Hochul. But the problem is that the way New York is working in the political sphere is anti-Trump, 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 instead of like trying to work with the Trump administration to make things better for the New York citizens. Well, they don't want to do that. They just want to demonize Trump. Let's listen to GB News here.
And Trump's America First agenda. The AUKUS Pact would provide Australia with its first nuclear submarines and has been widely seen as a response to the threat of China. Australia's defence minister says he's confident the pact will succeed. And one of the world's most active volcanoes is still erupting. Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island has been spewing fountains of lava more than 330 feet in the air. It's the latest event in an eruption which started nearly 6 months ago. Scientists with the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory say the fountains could climb even higher as the activity intensifies. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me at 4:30.
Thank you, Tatiana. Our top story today. Over 50 British nationals are feared dead after an Air India flight bound for London Gatwick crashed shortly after takeoff. But according to Indian media, a British national has survived the Air India plane crash. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh said he heard a loud noise around 30 seconds after takeoff before the plane went down. You can see pictures of your screen of him now. A miraculous survival. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh there. That's the first picture of him. He survived that crash. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner was engulfed in a huge fireball after plummeting into a building in the suburb of Ahmedabad in Western India. And local police have said over 200 bodies have been recovered from that site. We're going to now speak with GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, I was so touched earlier in the show, earlier in the day, when you said people will just cling onto the hope of a miracle, of what seemed, initially we heard reports, all passengers feared dead, and yet, in this past 20 minutes,
Bloomberg is talking about the same
story.
thing, so let's listen to Bloomberg here.
Aircraft and what caused the crash. I mean, it reached an altitude of 625 feet and then it sort of just plummeted to the ground in a massive fireball. And we know that over 200 people have been pulled out dead. There has been some mention of survivors. We don't really know how many. The police said that survivors have been taken to hospital. We're not quite sure whether those survivors are from the aircraft or whether they're from the residential building. So the plane crashed into a residential building. It was a medical college hostel, and that's where students and doctors were eating lunch when the plane crashed. So it was a massive tragedy for Air India, for India, and obviously it's raised lots of questions on Boeing, and we're still waiting to see what those answers actually are to those questions as to what caused it and where do we go from here?
So typically, who leads these investigations here? Is it the host country? Is it the airline? How does that work?
Yes, so the investigation will be led by investigators from India. So typically when a plane crashes, the country where the plane crashed leads the investigation into what went wrong. The other countries that we have FAA input, we have NTSB input, we have input from the manufacturer, in this case Boeing, and also from GE because they made the engine. So there will be input from others. And we've also seen the UK Air Air Accident Investigation Board talking that they would be sending some investigators to India tomorrow. So it'll be a multinational effort in terms of trying to find out what went wrong, and then they will sort of determine where the problem came up from and what really caused this crash.
We are seeing Boeing shares down, obviously looking at GE because they were using GE engines. Are those market reactions, investors' reactions, legitimate, considering how much unknowns there are, how hard it is to fly planes, and the variables like birds?
It's difficult to actually put a sort of input this onto Boeing or GE because, I mean, this aircraft has been in service for over 11 years, almost 12 years. So it's not a brand new aircraft that's just come off fresh off the line from Boeing. So, I mean, it is sort of far-fetched to sort of pin the blame on Boeing without sort of ascertaining the causes of what happened and what went wrong. I mean, obviously, the investigation will determine what went wrong and who was at fault, and if there was pilot error, if there was any technical issue, if there was something wrong with the plane or with the engines. But it's all still too early to determine the cause of it. And so it does seem to be an initial reaction, and we will get more clarity on what really went wrong in the days and months ahead as the investigators sort of pour through the flight data recorders, the cockpit voice recorders, and sort of piece together minute by minute, second by second, what really went wrong.
All right, Sid, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your reporting. Siddharth Philip, Deputy Team Leader for Global Aviation, Bloomberg News. He is based in London, but he's reporting from our Paris bureau today. Let's switch gears, get back to technology. One of the big stories in the tech space today, Micron, to invest about $200 billion in U.S. chip manufacturing and R&D. To break it all down for us, Jake Silverman joins us here from Jake Silverman from Bloomberg Intelligence joins us. Jake, how big of a deal? I mean, $200 billion, that gets my numbers. Is this part of this onshoring, reshoring commitments that we're seeing across a lot of different companies and industries? Is that what's happening here with Micron?
Yeah, I would liken it to that. I mean, we've seen pretty high-profile announcements from companies like TSMC, Apple, Global Foundries. And so Micron's already committed to spending a lot in the United States, and this is just a continuation and extension of that.
So what's the new spend and what's previously announced spend?
Yeah, so it seems like there's a few numbers kind of thrown around there. It seems like there's an additional $30 billion. A lot of that, I believe, is in R&D, but I've seen $125 billion beforehand. But regardless of the fact, it was $100 billion plus now, at least $200 billion over likely what amounts to be several decades.
So in reality, how does the industry view building chips here? Like historically, what chips were built here or created here and what were fabbed outside of the US?
Yeah, so I mean, just to keep it Micron specific, as we already know, right, you have Intel in the United States, mostly, supplying to themselves, TSMC being kind of the world's foundry of global foundries with their fab, and a lot of internal fabs across the United States. But Micron specifically, the vast majority of their capacity comes from Taiwan and slightly lesser extent, Japan. And so this is really is a bit of a shift in terms of their strategy, but something, as we just talked about, has been a plan for several years now.
How much does Micron usually spend in CapEx a year? And would this be comparable?
Well, it's a little bit difficult to determine exactly because we don't know the timeline, like the exact how much they're going to spend per year. But
typically, like what do they normally and what have they been spending?
Yeah,
in CapEx?
no, I mean they're planning this year to spend between I think roughly 15 billion in terms of fiscal year. I have to double check my numbers, but that would sound like a number that would over the course of several decades we'd expect them to spend plus.
All right, I'm going to explain something that I'm going to add to my slide deck for the weekly analysis of these different ETFs in the market. And that analysis is looking at the VIX. I've been talking about the VIX. The VIX is a risk index. And as it goes up, there's more stress in the market and the equity market goes down. All right. But you can trade volatility. All right. So the VIX is a volatility index. All right. But you can position yourself to, and this is for more complex trading. All right. So this is not for everybody, but you can mitigate some of the risk by positioning your portfolio or your trades. Let's say you're longing Apple, for example. Now, there's idiosyncratic risk in Apple, but you can somewhat offset it by usually when VIX goes up, usually stocks go down. All right. Well, you can trade in these indexes that I'm talking about are trading indexes, not investing indexes. So they will help you to mitigate the volatility. If the VIX is going down, then there are indexes that will benefit from that. And if VIX is going up, then you'll have indexes that will benefit from it. Now, again, VIX spikes are heteroscedastic, basically meaning that it happens at periods of time, they spike and then come back down and then meet a normal level. But it kind of dissipates. So like, for example, over a 2 or 3 month period, you may be going from low volatility in VIX to about, let's say 17, 16, sometimes even 12. and it's just steady, 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 steady. All right. Then it's just slowly creeping up, maybe from 15 to about 17. When it's slowly creeping up, then you want to get into ETFs that are more in line with waiting for that spike. All right. So if it's just slightly elevating, you're getting into one of these volatility indexes that are tracking to a spike in the VIX. And then all of a sudden there's a gigantic spike, this heteroscedastic moment, and then it comes back down. If you position yourself just before that spike, you'll be able to catch that spike of volatility while your equity in Apple has gone down. You've caught that spike of volatility in that index, and then you close the position. You've made money, and that money has offsetted the loss of the price depreciation in an equity, let's say of Apple. This is called hedging. This is called hedging Vega, all right? For the ones that are really into this, all right? There are different Greek letters that you can do certain types of hedging strategies, especially in the option market, but you can create hedging strategies using ETFs that mimic this hedging of Delta, hedging of Vega, hedging of Gamma, all right? So this is a Vega hedging strategy. So in that case, you're seeing that there's an increase in VIX. It's getting close to that 2.5, 3 month period of time when there's a spike in the index. So you get in and you're waiting. You may be losing some money at first, but then all of a sudden it spikes and you make a ton of money. Then you close the position. All right. You can't hold it because you've lost. If you hold it, you lose that volatility because it spikes and then comes back down. Those are the ETFs that track the increase in VIX. There are ETFs that track the decrease. Now the decrease, what you do is you wait for a spike and then you buy the ETF. And then when the VIX starts to go down, the ETF is starting to go up. And that way is another way to capture volatility. All right. And so that strategy is that, okay, you know that there is going to be an ETF that's going to gain rapidly as there's a rapid fall in VIX. So you're capturing that volatility. Your Apple stock, in this case, dropped when the VIX spiked. All right. And then as the VIX is starting to come back down, either in the intraday or a couple days later, you have an ETF that's starting to go up. And you are seeing your Apple stock starting to go up too, because the VIX is going down. Now, there are other variables, idiosyncratic variables that are tied to, let's say, Apple. But you can do this also for the S&P 500, just the broad index. If the index goes down with a spike in VIX, then you can short VIX. All right. That spike came up. Equities went down. You're shorting the VIX. So when it's starting to come back down to mean revert, you're making money and the equities are starting to heal and come back up. And so you're gaining the fall of volatility. So you can position yourself to gain money in the spike, but you got to be quick. Once you see that spike, you got to close the position. Or you can short volatility, where it's a little bit longer play. When I say longer play, it could be a few hours, maybe a couple days. All right? That's how you do it. It's how you capture that heteroscedastic movement. All right? Just before it happens or right after it happens. Depends on how you want to play it. Okay. So with that background of how to trade volatility, not invest. You cannot hold these for investment. You'll destroy your P&L. They're very short term. They're designed to be very short term. So for example, there are some ETFs that I've been looking at, SVXY and VIXY. They're tied together, they're inverses. And the other one is SVIX and the UVIX. Those are inverses of each other. So with the SVXY, and you apply it the same way. The SVXY is inversely related to the VIX, while the VIXY is correlated, positively correlated to the VIX. The SVIX inversely correlated, negatively correlated to VIX, and the UVIX is positively correlated, and that's how you play it. So again, if VIX is going to start to spike, right, and you want to capture it to come down, you want to short VIX, then what you want to do is just use SVXY or SVIX. If you're thinking that the VIX is starting to build up and there's going to be some sort of moment, normally these moments take place every 2.5 to 3 months, sometimes every 2 months. So anywhere from 2 to 2.5, 3 months, and then boom, there's a spike, and then it comes back down really quick. Now, and I personally think that has something to do with a 90-day funding mechanism in these illiquid markets, but behind the scenes. But if VIX is about to spike, then you want to buy it a few days before. Wait, boom, it spikes. That VIX ETF positively correlated, it's going to spike, and then you close it out. So that's how you do it. All right, let's talk about some other products that I have. Cardiovascular health is super important, especially in the United States. Two of the biggest diseases in the United States is diabetes and heart disease. Now, another thing that is big is cancer. So, but the thing is that by bringing down inflammation, that helps your vascular health and also your immune system. Now, taking lignans will bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. It also helps with your immune system and your endocrine system. And by bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing the chances of plaque formation. Ashwagandha root will help to control cortisol levels and blood glucose levels, reduce inflammation. That helps your immune system and also your cardiovascular system. A lot of people don't realize if you have high glucose levels constantly, you're causing a lot of damage at the vascular level. And that will lead to plaque formation, microbleeding, and other problems with tissues. And turmeric brings down those free radicals, brings down inflammation. And by doing that, you're helping your immune system and your cardiovascular system. So stacking the turmeric and the ashwagandha and the lignans together is a powerful stack to help with the immune system, help with the vascular system, and you get an added benefit that you're helping your endocrine system too. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the lignans. Very powerful stack. So use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
I'm sure there's lots of risks that the attorneys put into the prospectus. We get questions about interchange all the time. We really like this model of relying primarily on payments-driven revenue. That's about 72% of our revenue comes from payments. And what we like about it is it's aligned with the best interests of our members. We have to earn our position as the top of wallet card every day, and we do it to the tune of about, our average customer does about 54 transactions a month. So they're incredibly engaged. And when you couple that with the digital first low cost structure, That allows us to develop very healthy, profitable relationships with this interchange-driven business model. The reality is that our model has allowed us to offer fee-free banking to millions of consumers who otherwise would be paying hundreds of dollars a year to have a bank account.
You're able to be cheaper because of AI. I'm interested quickly, though. Regulatory risk that those interchange fees go smaller, particularly if you become bigger.
Well, you know, we have a balanced set of revenue in the payments area. We have a debit card payments volume. We also have a secured credit card that's actually growing at a faster clip than debit. So we think we're very well balanced. And given the love and engagement we have, there's no shortage of opportunities for us to offer new products and services over time.
All right, Chris Britt, Chime CEO. We're waiting for the start of trade, but indicating a big jump at the open. Thank you very much for joining us on Bloomberg Tech. All right, coming up, we're actually going to go back in history.
Okay, right now that was Chris Britt, co-founder and CEO of Chime, is speaking with BT anchors Ed Ludlow and Caroline Hyde. So that was interesting. Chime has not opened yet. His IPO at a price last night has not opened yet. Again, back in the day when I was doing these things, we had these babies open at 10, 10:30, no later. I don't know.
No more. You're thinking 1. Like now we're looking 1 at best.
No, and then they had anchor investors. We never had that. We just kind of made a bunch of phone calls and we got it out the door. All right, let's switch gears to something really cool. And Chime is really cool too for a lot of folks that are on to that fintech stuff. Jason Kelly joins us here, Bloomberg Originals chief correspondent. You and Alex Rodriguez, the deal with Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly. Man, you guys got a good one coming up.
There's sound.
Oh, there's
We
sound.
have sound. You can hear a preview because
Here we go.
basketball legend Magic Johnson broke down how he was able to make the transition from being a legendary basketball player to a successful businessman. And Jason Kelly and Alex Rodriguez sat down with him on the latest episode of The Deal.
The hardest thing I thought I was going to do was play against Larry Bird and Michael Jordan. The hardest thing was to go before the board and then go into a movie theater packed with
I really don't fucking care about Magic Johnson. Totally. All right, let's go to GB.
Going into the climb there at the end of the runway, rotating to go up what should be the climb to its cruising altitude. But it's very clear, although the nose is up initially and it does gain some altitude, it's then sort of coming down the nose. It seems kind of flattens out a bit before a few seconds later the nose tips up again, and that might explain why we see the tail section of this aircraft that appears to have embedded in a building, but otherwise not too badly damaged. It's sheared off. And there, of course, the very distressing images of that fireball, that huge fireball that erupted just on impact. So, I mean, that just shows you it was milliseconds. It must have been just as the plane was impacting the ground that this 40-year-old British national, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, was somehow thrown away from the explosion and managed to walk out of that.
And Mark White, we just had a latest least 290 people now feared dead, according to police sources in India, bearing in mind 242 passengers. So that would indicate, Mark White, some 50 odd or perhaps more on the ground. Of course, the aircraft went into a residential area believed to be blocks where doctors were living. I think I heard reports some 200 were living in that block. So the body count, the death count, Mark White, now increasing, and yet at the same time, Mark White, adding further incredible, just trying to get my head around, you know, how anybody could have walked away from that firebomb we just saw there, of that plane going down. This individual, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, has to be, I don't know, touched by the hand of God. An incredible chain reaction of most incredible good fortune. Who knows? But the latest line there, Mark White, 290 at least now feared dead.
Yes, and that would, of course, indicate what's that, 40 52 others have died on the ground so far. And you're right, yes, there was a residential block, residential complex really for medical staff working in the local area hospitals. And there were 96, I think, separate flats for some of those junior doctors, and 200 or so were living in those flats at the time when this plane came down. We got a report from the Indian about an hour and a half ago or so, saying that 60 of those
I want to go back to
were taken to hospitals with varying degrees.
You're talking about the same subject.
In critical condition, others less.
In Ahmedabad.
Locals joined first responders in the rush to the crash site, scrambling to douse the flames and search the debris. Soon, rescue teams were pulling bodies from the wreckage. Not just passengers and crew, but people who were in their homes when Air India Flight 171 plunged into this residential area. It struck a residence for medical students.
The plane crashed at a doctor's hostel. The rescue agency, firefighters, police, and civil administration reached the crash site within 2 or 3 minutes. The search and rescue operations is currently underway.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi described the crash as a tragedy and heartbreaking beyond words. The plane had barely begun its journey from Ahmedabad to London. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner with 242 people on board came down just 5 minutes after takeoff. A huge plume of black smoke, easily visible from the airport, erupted from the wreckage. Air India says there were at least 169 Indian nationals on the flight, as well as 53 people from the UK, 1 Canadian and 7 Portuguese nationals. The British government has deployed crisis teams in India and the UK.
It will undoubtedly be causing a huge amount of worry and concern to the many, many families and communities here, and the government will provide all the support that it can.
This is the first ever crash of this particular Boeing model, but it comes after a raft of safety incidents, some deadly, involving other Boeing planes in the past several years. The incidents have led to questions over the leadership of the aerospace giant, with some industry experts accusing the company of prioritizing cost-cutting over safety.
Britain's foreign minister has reacted to that Air India plane crash. The flight was carrying over 50 British nationals. Here's what David Lammy had to say.
My thoughts, and I'm sure those of the entire House, are with those who've been affected by the tragic plane crash in India this morning. We know that British nationals were on board, and Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that the FCDO is working urgently with local authorities to support British nationals and their families, and has stood up a crisis team in both Delhi and in London.
For more on the reaction coming from the United Pavia reporting.
There is huge concern at what has been coming out over the last several hours from Western India, and after this plane crash, an Air India flight with 242 passengers, amongst which 169 Indian nationals. Some of those will have been, of course, Gujarati nationals, whether coming here to the UK on business or because of family ties. 53 Britons, which is a very high number of British nationals as well. So we've got the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, reacting, of course, saying that these scenes emerging of this London-bound plane carrying these many British nationals and crashing are simply devastating, his word, and that he's being kept updated as the situation develops. He says that his thoughts are with the passengers and their families at this deeply distressing time. A distressing time, as we must point out, that the plane would have been landing in about 3.5 hours at London Gatwick. Gatwick, the second biggest airport out of London, the biggest, of course, being Heathrow. King Charles has said he is desperately shocked by the crash. We've got other leaders reacting. Also, the Conservative, Her Majesty's opposition leader Kemi Badenoch saying heartbreaking news from Ahmedabad, and of course the Foreign Office from the get-go putting numbers, hotline numbers. One is +44 207 008 5000 at the disposal of people who are concerned about possibly people they know who are on the flight, friends, relatives. And of course, the Foreign Office saying that they are working closely with local authorities in India to urgently establish the facts and provide support to those involved.
Now, Air India CEO Campbell Wilson came out with a statement after the crash. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The injured passengers have been taken by local authorities to the nearest hospitals. We are actively working with the authorities on all emergency response efforts. A special team of caregivers from Air India is on their way to Ahmedabad to provide additional support. Investigations will take time, but anything we can do now, we are doing. We know that many people are concerned for the welfare of their loved ones. We have set up a special helpline that friends and family can reach us at.
We can now bring in Keith McKay, aviation expert and aircraft accident investigation and reconstruction aviation consultant. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. This flight seems to have crashed moments after taking off. What are some of the possible reasons behind why a plane, a relatively new Dreamliner, would crash like this?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me onto your program. We really don't know many of the facts now. A lot of them are going to be easily discoverable, I think. But at the present time, all we can do is speculate. Now, we have video of the airplane in the last few hundred feet of its descent up until the impact point. The wings appear level. It doesn't appear that either engine is developing any power. So we'll probably have to go with the theory, at least, that the engines may have lost.
We're going to listen to Trump.
He's speaking right now. Mismanagement, to
a House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who's a brave man who went through hell. Steve went through hell. And we have a lot of other people here that I won't be able to because I don't have your name down, and I'm looking and I see people's names. I'll do a couple of you, but thanks as well to Mark Wayne Mullen, Senator. Mark Wayne, thank you. Stand up, Mark Wayne. Don't fight him. He's a serious fighter in a lot of ways, and he's a great guy too. Thank you, Mark Wayne. Deb Fisher, Deb. Thank you, Deb. Good. Pete Ricketts, who's going to do very well in the upcoming election. Thank you. Thank you, Pete. John Husted, who's really moving along in Ohio. John, good luck. You're going to do well. All endorsed people. John Curtis, who's doing terrifically. John, thank you. Good job. They all say excellent. What can I say? Good job. And Bernie Moreno, who won a race that was not winnable. They all said it's not winnable. He won in Ohio. They said you can't win that race. It's a waste of time. You're just wasting your time, right, Bernie? Wasn't a waste of time, was it? Huh? And he won by like 5 points too. Won by a lot. Along with Representatives Kevin Kiley, Vince Fong, Jay Obernolte, Doug Lamaffa, Daryl Issa. Where's Daryl? I haven't seen you in such a long time. Look at you. How good you look, huh? Good when you have those big margins. It's easier. John Joyce, great guy. John, thank you. Thank you, John. Dusty Johnson, Morgan Griffith, Troy Balderson, Troy from a place called Ohio. And he played very cute at one time, but then he got, boy, I'll tell you, he's become a good politician. Where is Troy now? Where I haven't seen him used for years. I endorsed you early when he was early and younger, but you still look young and you've done fantastically good. Good work, really good work. Claudia Tenney, New York. Claudia, thank you, Claudia. John James. John James. I don't know. You know, he's running for governor, but I'm not sure I'm happy about that, John. Do we have somebody good to take your seat? Because otherwise, we're not letting him run for governor. We can't. You have somebody good, right? Okay. As long as you like him, they'll win. Tracy Mann. Tracy, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Michael Baumgartner. Michael. Thank you, Michael. Good job. David Rouser. Thank you. Glenn Rothman. Hi, Glenn. Thank you very much, Glenn. Brett Guthrie. Brett. Thank you, Brett. Rudy Yackham. Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. And I want to thank you all. There's some additional people in the room, but we have to get back to this. Is like so big. This is a big one. Under the previous administration, I could go point after point, everything they did, open borders, men playing in women's sports, transgender for everybody, let's go transgender. What a group of people you had over there. They must have hated our country. Under the previous administration, the federal government gave left-wing radicals in California dictatorial powers to control the future of the entire car industry all over the country, all over the world, actually. Because they have to build a car. They can't build 19 different cars called the same thing. And really, it was all over the world what was happening. They approved Governor Gavin Newsom's ridiculous plan to impose a 100% ban on all new gas-powered cars within a very short period of time. Think of this. You couldn't buy any other car except an electric-powered car. And in California, they have blackouts and brownouts. They don't have enough electricity right now to do the job. And countrywide, you'd have to spend $4 trillion to build the firing plants, to be able to, they go to firing, they call them a lot of things, charging plants, firing plants. $4 trillion you'd have to spend. In the Midwest, they built 9 of them. 9 individuals, it's like a pump. It's just like a pump, except instead of gas, electricity comes out. They built 8 of them. $9 billion they spent for 8 little hoses, $9 billion. Now, I'm sure they could have done it for about, 1/1000th of that, but even if they did, it's unaffordable. They approved Governor Gavin's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. By the way, you would, if I didn't bring the military in?
All right, that was President Trump in Washington, D.C., in the White House, making some comments there. Right now, we're going to reset here, and we'll go to Mr. John Tucker and get a Bloomberg Business Flash. John, what do you have for us?
All right, the major stock averages right now still mixed. S&P 500 10 points higher. That's up 0.2%. The Dow 38 points lower. NASDAQ 100 up 41 points. That's a rise of 0.2%. Boeing shares worst performing stock in the S&P 500 after the Air India crash. Those shares down right now just over 5%. Best performer Oracle shares reaching a record high. The company projecting a 70% gain in cloud infrastructure sales this fiscal year, driven by its focus on AI work and cloud computing. More tame inflation data today, but Adam Posen at the Peterson Institute, he's not expecting anything from the Federal Reserve anytime soon.
We're not falling off a cliff in terms of unemployment or growth. So anyway, forecast, they're going to sit tight, and they're going to sit tight at least through September, probably till fourth quarter.
And we do have the long bond auction. That is at 1 o'clock, looking for signs of take-up or maybe investors skipping that today. What are the insiders doing? Corporate executives selling shares at the fastest rate since November, with 778 selling their shares, 200 buying through June 11th. Some of the latest data there. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul.
All right. Thanks so much, John Tucker. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news in business, economics, and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. Just an update here. President Trump is speaking at the White House. He will at some point be answering some questions in a wide-ranging speech. He's talking about EVs, chargers being too expensive, changing the laws potentially in California about cars. He's also touting coal, natural gas, as well as nuclear energy. On the flip side, you are seeing oil, which he says he didn't like, on the upswing here. You're looking at WTI up 68. You're looking at Brent almost at 70, at 69. The reason, though, is pretty scary, and that is heightened tensions within the Middle East. A recent report from ABC saying that Israel is mulling military action against Iran in a couple days. Mike McGlone is Bloomberg Intelligence senior commodity strategist, and he joins us now. When we take a look at sort of the worst case scenario, it would be the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where you have like a third or more of oil flows through. What would be the price impact of something like that?
Well, we've seen the most widely used numbers around $100 a barrel, but you mentioned the worst case scenario. It's never happened. The Strait of Hormuz has never been closed. So I love the threats, but even if Iran does try to close it, it's basically suicidal. It would cease to exist. And if we did have that kind of pump, it would be a global recessionary trajectory. The world's already seen pretty significant downtrends in GDP and demand pull growth, and most notably for crude oil demand and supply increasing. So if that happened, it would just incentivize that tilt towards a global recession, and then crude oil eventually getting much cheaper later. So right now, it's just a classic bear market rally, and it found an excuse. All markets, bear markets, find an excuse. It's a question of how it goes. So I'll end with this. The 200-day moving average of WTI crude oil is around $70 a barrel, and it's still heading lower, and we're below that. It's quite the bear market.
So, Mike, as we think about just supply here, what I guess is different now versus 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, as we think about supply constraints, perhaps in the Middle East, is the U.S. is now a net exporter. So that changes the calculus a little bit, doesn't it?
That's been the main pressure factor on commodities overall, most notably crude oil, for about 15 years, Paul. You nailed it. It's that excess of supply coming out of the U.S., declining demand, the absolute need to export. And you can look at OPEC. Their part of global production is less than a third now. 20 years ago, it was about 40%. So they're declining, becoming less relevant. And my EV is 11 years old. So it's significantly a downward trend. But it's not just crude oil. I mean, I'm a commodity person. You see it in iron ore, in the grains, and corns, and soybean, and wheat. And then you look at that bond yield in China, it's heading lower, about 1.7%. This is a clear global deflationary trajectory for a lot of commodities, with one exception, copper for now, most notably gold. But crude oil is not alone. Particularly, I have to mention corn, because we get almost 13% of our unleaded gas in this country now from corn, from ethanol.
Yeah, and I should point out too that if we take a look at corn, there's been issues and reports about farmers being worried about labor, et cetera, and that you had President Trump saying like, "Oh, we're going to look into it. We're thinking about it. Things will be fixed." What does that mean? And are you hearing about worker issues when it comes to farmers?
Not in the Corn Belt so much, Alex. Maybe in some of the fruits and vegetables markets, somewhat maybe in California, but. That's the key thing about the Corn Belt is we've used maybe such a fraction of people now. The key theme I get out there every time is the technology is moving so fast, even autonomous tractors now, where we just don't need people as much anymore. So if that's a problem, it gets incentivized more this tilt towards technology replacing production and actually increasing supply. So the thing is about the grains, it's global, and it's on the back of major supply out of Brazil. And why is that happening? Because prices spiked at the 2022 peak, and they're still heading low. We still have that overhang of supply, and that's still the case in things like crude oil.
Hey, Mike, I've been a little remiss here because I've been focusing on gold, and granted, it is up 29% year to date, but spot silver's up 25%. That's a nice little move there.
It's just catching up, but remember, silver's known as the devil's metal for a reason, because
the devil's metal.
I've never heard that say
right.
the devil's metal.
Yeah, the devil's metal. It's oftentimes moved, and people who trade it like me, I used to have hair. Its volatility is double that of gold, and right now it's just catching up. So if gold's up about 30% on an annual basis, silver on a volatility weighted basis for a risk adjustment should be up about 60%. But the fact is, it's just catching up. It's broke above a pretty good resistance, about $35 an ounce. I think it's getting to 40. It's a matter of time. But most of the metals, including platinum, silver, and a little bit of palladium, are just catching up to gold because they're so cheap relative to beta. And beta in precious metals is gold.
All right, Mike McGlone, thank you so much. I remember years ago, hey, Mike, what's your commodities call? Buy gold and sell everything else. But that was an easy trade, and I blew that again. Missed that easy trade. Mike McGlone, Senior Commodity Strategist, Bloomberg Intelligence, calling in via that Zoom thing from his headquarters in Miami, Florida. So we saw the president making some comments. Again, if he takes any Q&A, we'll try to dip into that. Otherwise, we're just looking at these markets here, the S&P. Not a lot of direction here. You know, it's kind of what we've seen most of the morning here. The Dow's up 7 points. Excuse me, let's start again. The S&P's up 7 points. The Dow is down about 60. And NASDAQ up 11 points. So a lot of red and green on the screen. What is moving? Our yields, they continue to come down here. We got the 10-year yield down about 5 basis points. Let's call it 4.37%. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Definitely oil is going up, but I think it's getting to the point where it needs to come back down a little bit. It's at 68.29 right now. And I've been looking at the SCO, which is trading at 17.42, which is shorting oil. So I think that oil is going to come back down a little bit here. I think the trading range is around 65 to about 68. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Cleanse or the Max 14. They are the first pillar of my core protocol, and it'll help to boost up the immune system. You take a teaspoon a day, you swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20, 30 seconds, and then swallow it. And what that will do is improve your oral cavity, help the health of your oral pharynx, maintain that mucosal barrier, and help with the epithelial lining. That's very important for your immune system. So you can get the Cleanse. It's a 30 parts per million. Again, take a teaspoon a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two and then go back to your maintenance dose. And the Max 14 that I have in stock, take it the same way, teaspoon. And that's Max 14 is 14 parts per million. I also have Max 35, which is 35 parts per million. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take that. I've been taking it for more than 5 years every day, right? And if I don't feel well, I'll take a tablespoon or two. Please go to my store and get the dual purpose deodorants. These deodorants you'll use as a deodorant every day, but it'll help to detoxify your body. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. It has no aluminum, no baking soda. It's for males and females. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and in citrus. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the very high quality deodorants. And lastly, resveratrol. Resveratrol is something I've been taking for decades. It's going to help with the health of the mitochondria. It's going to soak up free radicals because it's an antioxidant. It's going to help with youthful gene expression. It helps to get rid of senescent cells. And when you are repopulating tissues that can be repopulated from adult stem cells, your tissues actually age less because they have longer telomere length, and they'll have a gene expression that is more closely related to a youthful cell. As you get older and the cells start to just sit there and age, there's methylation that takes place and certain genes are turned off. And these are genes that you need for youthful gene expression. Resveratrol helps to reduce that, right? And when you're taking it over long periods of time, what happens, one of the tricks of anti-aging protocols is that if you do them for many years and you're reducing the oxidative stress in the cell by soaking up free radicals, you're bringing down inflammation. All right, so the tissues are healthier and your immune system is more robust and your endocrine system is more robust. But if you're doing it over a long period of time and you're doing it over those points in time where you're these inflection points, your brain ages and your body ages at certain inflection points. You're aging every year, but there's a point, there's a milestone at a certain point where there is an increase in methylation of certain genes. Well, if you take an anti-aging protocol throughout that gate or throughout that milestone, you're reducing the chances of actually that methylation, and therefore the cell is actually younger. That's how it works. But you have to do this over a long periods of time to prevent this from happening or to mitigate it. So if you take antioxidants or let's say an anti-aging protocol in your 20s and 30s, as you're moving into these other gates, you will age slower, all right, versus ones that don't. All right, let me give you an example. Age 40, you start to methylate certain, around 35 to 40, you start to methylate certain genes. And you'll notice in pictures, if you look at someone that is an early adult, let's say in their 20s, and you look at pictures through, if you could have a stack of pictures going from 20 years of age all the way to 80, you'll notice there's points in time where there's like a jump in aging. All right. And then it just slows down again. And then a jump in aging, and then it slows down again. So from about 20 to about 35, you're aging slowly, but there's a big jump at about age 35 or 40. And then there's a series of methylizations that take place. But if you're taking an anti-aging protocol throughout those 20s and 30s, then you're postponing that actual milestone. You're postponing it. Instead of it happening at age 40, it may actually be happening at age 50, depending on your protocol and the lifestyle that you choose. So with that, you can actually slow down the aging process and prevent this over-methylization that's taking place in the cell. Another key milestone is around age 55 or around age 60. All right. So from age 35 or 40 to age about 55 to 60, there is this period where you're aging per year, but there's a big jump, all right, in methylization. And then there is there's also brain function. And brain function and brain aging is different than actually for the rest of the body. The rest of the body actually starts aging quicker than typical brain function, all right? So those brain functions, you'll start at about age 50 is when that first inflection point starts, where they're starting to decline. And then there's around age 65 or 70, where there's another big jump and decline. And then there's another one in the late 70s, maybe even early 80s if you make it to that point. So the key here is that on average, there are these moments in chronological age where there's a change in the methylization where your genes don't express the way they were when they were younger. But if you soak up those free radicals and bring down that inflammation, you're slowing down that methylization process. If someone's chronically inflamed, they age faster. Their methylization is quicker. If you soak up free radicals, reduce stress in the cell, the methylization is slower. And so you age slower. So that's part of the trick here. It says that the longer you do these protocols, the better off you are because you're bringing down that inflammation and you're maintaining that low inflammation. You're bringing down those free radicals and you're maintaining those low free radical concentrational levels. And you're building muscle and building bone density and training your mind, eating properly, detoxifying your body. And over the decades, when you go into these milestones, you're postponing it. You're postponing that methylization. Or you are radically reducing the amount of methylization that's taking place. Super important. And when that is happening, your telomere lengths are longer. Your methylization is more of a youthful gene expression instead of an older gene expression. And therefore, you just look younger. Now, you can't roll back the clock where, let's say you're 45 years old and you're going to turn into a 12-year-old. That's not going to happen. But what you can do is slow down this methylation process. And there's a compound effect where you gain so much more. If you start doing it in your 40s, you gain so much more when you're in your 60s because there's a compound effect. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Follow my protocol. It works.
Continue to trend lower, down 5 basis points on that 2-year. Good luck trading, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Steve Kathan. There's breaking news from the White House. Another federal showdown with California looms as President Trump is signing a resolution blocking the state's move to phase out the sale of gasoline-powered cars.
We officially rescue the U.S. auto industry from destruction by terminating California electric vehicle mandate once and for all.
That plan had been adopted by 11 other states. California plans to go to courts. A federal judge today hears the state's challenge to the president's deployment of federal troops to L.A. to deal with protests over ICE raids. On Capitol Hill, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and other Democrats are before a House committee defending sanctuary cities.
Minnesotans are angry with what they've seen happen to their neighbors. They're angry that the federal government has been snatching people up, putting them in prison, and deporting them without a shred of due process.
Now to New York and the Harvey Weinstein sex crimes retrial. CBS's Michael Wallace says a mistrial on the last charge was declared.
The jury was stuck on that third-degree rape charge after delivering a partial verdict yesterday. They convicted the former movie mogul of one of the top charges, but acquitted him of the other. The judge declared the mistrial after the jury foreperson said he would not return to the jury room to deliberate because he felt bullied by another juror. The verdicts announced yesterday will stand.
Investigators are at work in India after the crash of a Boeing 787 jetliner that was bound for London. CBS's Chanel Call.
The Air India plane we know took off at about 1:38 p.m. local time, and it went down just 8 minutes after takeoff in the western Indian city of Ahmedabad. There were plumes of black smoke coming from the wreckage in the moments after that crash. The plane we know was carrying 242 passengers and crew on board, and at last check, emergency crews on the scene said they'd recovered 204 bodies from the crash site. The CBS News also confirming the tail of the plane landed on a hospital and that several homes were destroyed.
At least 4 people dead in San Antonio. Dozens of water rescues made all over that city as heavy rain flooded highways and left people stranded. A new Forbes Global 2000 list of the top companies that are shaping markets is out. Forbes staff writer Hank Tucker.
The top 5 is JP Morgan, then Berkshire Hathaway, then China's biggest bank, actually the world's biggest bank by assets, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Then at number 4, there's Saudi Aramco, the Saudi Arabian oil company. And then Amazon is number 5.
And checking Wall Street, the Dow is up 12 points. NASDAQ and S&P are trading higher. This is CBS News.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the toothpaste. This toothpaste is a very high-quality toothpaste that will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at the gum line, and help with gum health. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the toothpaste. Get a few tubes of this toothpaste for your household. It's the best toothpaste that you can get. In addition, it has no fluoride in it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this toothpaste. It has the structural nanosilver that will help with your oral hygiene. And with good oral hygiene, you're helping with your vascular system and your valvular system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
Local nonprofit O-Search reports picking up a signal from the dorsal fin of the biggest great white shark researchers have ever recorded off Pamlico Sound in North Carolina. They say 30-year-old-ish contender, who measures 14 feet and weighs more than 1,600 pounds, is likely making a stopover for food to build his energy reserves for the 1,000 or so summer migration to the northeastern U.S. or Atlantic Canada. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
7 families have filed suit challenging Arkansas's upcoming requirements that public school classrooms display the 10 Commandments. Betsy Jochum, the last surviving member of the 1940s Women's Baseball League that inspired the film A League of Their Own, has died. She was 104. I'm Steve Kathan, CBS News.
This is Balance of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
Evacuations begin in Iraq as reports indicate Israel may be about to attack Iran. Welcome to the Thursday edition as the U.S. moves personnel out of the way in key spots throughout the Middle East for fear of possible retaliation. We're going to have the latest on this precarious moment here ahead of more talk set for the weekend with Natasha Hall at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Republicans wrangling over reconciliation with a big meeting today between the leadership and the White House. We'll have the latest from Bloomberg News as we also track the latest on the investigation now into this terrible Air India crash. Analysis today from our panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us. And so we wind up the ban again today. Little Friday with Charlie Pellet and his update on Wall Street in New York. Hey, Charlie.
And indeed, good day, Joe Matthew from New York. We have got the Dow trading lower. Dow Jones Industrial Average right now down 36, down 0.1%. The S&P is advancing by 9 points, up by about 0.2% right now. But Nasdaq Composite Index higher by 25, up 0.1%. Stocks higher is more evidence of cooling inflation. Extended a week-long drop in bond yields. The 10-year right now 4.36%. The 2-year 3.90%. Gold up $32 the ounce, now up by 1%. Spot gold at $33.87 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil just about flat on the day now, $68.20 per barrel of WTI. Bitcoin now lower by 1.4% at $107,390 on a Bitcoin. The 30-year Treasury auction set to take place at 1 o'clock Wall Street time. Investors watching closely for signs of demand amid concerns over spiraling deficits and the impact of President Trump's tax bill. New data this morning on producer prices. PPI up 0.1% in May, indicating muted inflation across the board and no signs of price shocks from tariffs. Richard Clarida is a global economic advisor to PIMCO, also a former vice chair of the Federal Reserve. And on surveillance this morning, he talked about tariffs and the economic backdrop.
We're not seeing in the data that U.S. companies are using the tariffs as a reason or excuse to raise prices preemptively. We may see that once tariffs go into effect more broadly. But yeah, so far, I think you'd have to acknowledge the U.S. economy is holding up quite well.
Former Fed Vice Chair Richard Clarida interviewed this morning on surveillance, keeping an eye on Boeing shares. Boeing, member of the Dow, now lower by 5%. That Boeing 787 Dreamliner operated by Air India crashed shortly after taking off this morning, killing all 242 people on board. The worst accident involving the U.S. planemaker's most advanced twin-aisle aircraft. Again, recapping, S&P right now up 10, gain there of 0.2%. Balance of power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mann.
All right, Charlie, great to see you. Charlie Pellet here on the Thursday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio, satellite radio, channel 121, and on YouTube, where you can find us right now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live as you can watch and listen to the program. Also available on Bloomberg Originals. We're going to have more on this terrible news of the Air India crash a little bit later on this hour with Shelley Banjo as Charlie follows the Wall Street side of this whole story. We've got a couple of plates that we're spinning today, as always, so welcome. It's great to have you aboard. With our eyes on the White House, President Trump has been speaking for a little while right now in an effort to actually, he's got some business at hand. He's now talking about tariffs and a few other matters, but in fact, we're signing a couple of resolutions White House called them bills, resolutions that target California's EV incentives. They repeal the state-level mandates that have been in place now, supported by the Biden administration, GM, Toyota, among those lobbying against California's rules. If he makes some news here on the story that we're about to tackle, we'll bring you to the White House, because this is a precarious moment ahead of more talks that are scheduled for this weekend. It may not be an accident considering the timing with what we're seeing here, but a stark headline at the top of the New York Times: Israel appears ready to attack Iran. Knowing that this has been in the air for some time, and we've talked about it certainly quite a bit since Benjamin Netanyahu made his most recent visit to the White House, a visit in which President Trump reportedly waved him off. And it might be a little bit different this time with what we're hearing. Israel appears to be preparing to launch the attack soon, according to officials in the U.S. and Europe, obviously at a very sensitive time here in the Middle East. But as I mentioned, American and Iranian negotiators are supposed to get back to the table here on Sunday for another round of talks. And that's where we begin our conversation with Natasha Hall. I'm delighted to say she could join us today at this moment. Non-resident Senior Associate, Geopolitics, Foreign Policy Department at CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Natasha, it's great to see you. How much of this do we think is bluster ahead of the next round of talks, or is this a real attack that could be in the offing?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a very tense moment, I have to say. And I think that's really the question, whether or not this is a negotiating tactic. As you mentioned, Witkoff is heading to Oman on Sunday for the 6th round of negotiations with Iranian officials, both direct and indirect. And also tomorrow on Friday, Witkoff will meet with Israeli officials so that Israeli officials can talk about their concerns with regards to the Iranian nuclear program. And one would think it's also about a potential attack. Now, whether or not that attack actually takes place, I think remains to be seen, because for sure, Trump does not want a never-ending war. The issue is that Netanyahu does. It protects him politically, and surely there are fears in Israel of any kind of Iranian nuclear activity. But the question again, and I think I mentioned this last time I was on the program, is on enrichment. Israel does not want Iran to be able to enrich, and Iran sees it as an issue of sovereignty that they can't.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we were just looking at images of Steve Witkoff, who is still planning to attend the negotiations. He certainly knows this, Natasha. Is he capable of walking Iran back from that line? Or have we, in fact, found ourselves at a standoff here?
Well, what's interesting is just yesterday, he said that Iran can't enrich uranium. And the U.S. has been back and forth on this, including President Trump. It's unclear if they understand the details of uranium enrichment and nuclear program for Iran. And I suspect that they're getting a lot of their advice from Israel. Now, the big question is if they are willing to go along with an Israeli attack, because certainly a coordinated U.S.-Israeli attack on Iranian nuclear facilities would be more profound than Israel going it alone, so to speak. But they would have to at least get the green light. Obviously, Witkoff knows all of this. So potentially we're seeing the evacuation of personnel. We're seeing a lot of this bluster as a means to sort of up the ante prior to these negotiations to really push Iran to the edge. It's still totally well accepted.
Seems like a lot of trouble to be moving all these people to just put on a show. But Natasha, we do have and a really important piece of news here that Steve Witkoff will have with him at the table. This is the hook the administration, I guess, could lean on if, in fact, an attack moved forward here. The IAEA declaring Thursday Iran is not complying with nuclear non-proliferation obligations, the first time the UN's watchdog has passed a resolution against the country in 20 years. What did you think when you saw that headline?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because, again, you said it's unprecedented. It is unprecedented, and it shows that the U.S. is working with the E3 and with the IAEA on really putting the pressure on Iran to move forward with this. So, I mean, we could be hopeful, but again, last year we saw something like 170 Iranian proxy attacks on U.S. assets in the region. So, very, very scary times. I think we'll see a lot of tensions, especially in some of these other countries like Iraq, where there are softer targets as well. But the IAEA can't do much, but it is another negotiating tactic, I think.
Well, you make an interesting point here about U.S. involvement, because it does seem that Israel would need some help based on some of the reporting that we've done here. You consider the use of bunker busters, air defenses, refueling. How far would the U.S. go in taking part here?
I mean, I think that's the $1 million question. It's unclear if the U.S. would even be public about coordination with Israel. I think most people would agree that they would be green lighted. And in order to do the attack, it would be quite brazen for Israel to go it alone. But judging by the statements of Witkoff and of Trump in recent days, it looks like they are very publicly giving the green light, which is, again, why they're evacuating personnel. But I would just say one more thing for your listeners. An attack on an Iranian nuclear facility has happened before. But Iran just goes back to enriching uranium at another level and accelerates potentially. So we could see that again. And, quite frankly, we've been talking about rising tensions in the Middle East quite a bit for 2 years, and it's unclear where this ends. But hopefully it will come to some kind of de-escalation by next week, because I think everyone is on the edge of their seats at this moment in the region.
Israel certainly believes it's in the position of power here, right, Natasha? As we've discussed, there are a couple of reasons why we've found ourselves at this moment, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of air defenses right now that Iran has following the most recent back and forth with Israel, but also an emboldened Benjamin Netanyahu following some of the strife that we've seen in the region here. The idea as well that Iran would respond with hundreds of ballistic missiles, as I read in this story in the New York Times, being laughed at by Israel, because last time they tried that, most of them were knocked down, Natasha. Does Israel not have the moment that it was looking for?
Iran is in a very vulnerable position, as you point out. There was many different Israeli attacks on Iran and Iranian proxies last year that severely degraded Iran, including Hezbollah, which Iran uses to essentially launch attacks onto Israel and neighboring Lebanon. It doesn't really have that as much anymore, and certainly not Iran and Syria. And so Iran is in a very, very vulnerable position. That said, again, Iran doesn't go to war toe-to-toe with the U.S. or Israel. It sort of negotiates itself in the weeds of these various countries like Iraq. And I would have you know that, the 170 attacks also last year, Iranian attacks, very few casualties of U.S. airmen, of U.S. servicemen. And so, it's weak attacks, but it does, up the ante considerably. And it makes it much, much harder for the U.S. to have a presence in the Middle East as well.
We're out of time, Natasha. If this happens, would it be after Sunday?
I would suspect this would be after Sunday, yes, for sure. I think, again, whether or not this is for real or not, it's certainly a negotiating tactic.
This next round of talk is going to be critically important. Natasha Hall, I'm so glad that you could join us from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a real voice of expertise.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This collagen is dual purpose. It's going to help with your skin, your hair, your nails, your cartilage, your joints, your musculature, and your bone density. Take it every day. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, milk, or even a smoothie. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Take it every day. Very important. If you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex, the first 4 B vitamins are going to help with the mitochondria. That helps to build up that ATP so you have the energy sources that you need. Also, vitamin B complex helps with cellular metabolism. And vitamin B complex helps to protect your neurons. That's the reason why it's so important. We're going to start seeing lots of people having neural problems in the next 5 to 10 years. So you better get on board and start protecting those neurons. You have been warned. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight Formula. Goodnight Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Take it every night, and that will allow you to get into 3 cycles, maybe even 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, which is very important for you to detoxify your body, consolidate memory, and to be well rested. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night formula. To slow down the aging process, you need a good night's sleep. Super important. Another thing that's very important to do on a regular basis is to take zeolite. Zeolite will help to detoxify your body. How? What zeolite does is it binds to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, including PFAS and PFAS. And what you do is you take 2 small drops, maybe even 3, underneath your tongue, drink filtered water. Do that every day. If you want a more intense detoxification, where you're doing that maybe once or twice a year, and what you want to do is take maybe 5 small drops or slightly more underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water, and do that every day until the bottle's done, and then do that once or twice a year. But taking the zeolite is very important. In addition, filter your water, stay away from processed foods, and clean your environment. Reduce your exposure to chemicals, like cleaning solutions or paints that might be in your garage or in your basement. These types of chemicals, even though you may not even realize, but you're smelling them every day, small doses in your air. And by smelling them, by bringing them into your body, what's happening is it's affecting your endocrine system and your immune system. So you have to reduce that around your house and either double or triple layer them in containers so it reduces the degassing. So please clean the air environment, make sure you detoxify your body, drink filtered water, and stay away from processed foods. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen, get the Good Night formula, get the vitamin B complex, and the zeolite. That's a great stack right there. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
It's 12:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got the Dow just turning negative right now in the red. Little change, perhaps the key takeaway at this hour, looking at the Dow down by 0.5 point. S&P 500 index, though, off session highs, up 15 now, up by about 0.3%. The Nasdaq Composite Index up 47, up 0.2%. The Nasdaq 100 Index doing a little bit better, up now by 0.3%. But a down day for small cap shares. We have got the Dow lower now by 0.5%. Your 10-year, 4.36%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thank you for being with us on Balance of Power. We're going to steer you right back to the White House, as we told you. President Trump has just stepped up to the podium to take some questions after signing a couple of resolutions on California EV incentives. Let's get to live Q&A here from the White House on Bloomberg.
I told you the Auto Workers Union, we got tremendous votes, but they like me today even better than they did on Election Day on November 5th, because they see the results now. They're all happening. And yeah, and they have plants moving in, Brian. A lot of plants are moving in. Thank you very much for that question. Yeah.
Trying to kill the auto industry.
Oh, he was killing the auto industry. I don't think he knew it. I think he's a guy who, he's just got a faulty thought process. You look at that train, the train is the most, I've seen people, stupid people with cost overruns for years. I've watched where something would cost twice as much or 3 times. But this thing is costing 20 times more. It's the most incredible disaster I've ever seen. That's one. The cars are just as bad. Everything's bad. And now you have this situation. So his own sheriff, who's a good man, by the way, said 2 days ago, 3 days ago, that we could not have done this without the military. They were going to take over this whole, they couldn't have done it. Now today they got him to change his tune. He said, oh, I think we could have handled it. You know, so sad. He was so honest. I was using his quote all over the place that they got him to change. But he knows. Los Angeles would be right now burning to the ground, just like the houses burned to the ground. It's so sad what's going on in Los Angeles. Think of it. They had a fire that should have never had because they should have listened to me in the water. Eventually, we broke in and we had the water come down from the Pacific Northwest. I could show you pictures now with the half pipes, the big half pipes coming all the way down California. Water, so much water. They don't have any droughts. They don't have any, they have so much water. They sent it all out to the Pacific Ocean for 20 years. So ridiculous. And we got them to take it now. But what they do and what they're doing, this is a big problem. And what they really want to do is keep criminals because they're trying to protect criminals. Sanctuary cities are a disaster in this country. And most of the voters don't want them. Politicians like them for whatever reason, but I think the politicians are wrong. That's why we won in such a convincing fashion. We won all 7 swing states. We won by millions of votes. We won 2,750 districts as opposed to 505. That's why when you look at the map, it's almost all red. It's got 2 little blue stripes on each side of it. It's almost all red. But now you have to, I always got to Gavin. I've liked him always. He said I never called him. You know, they asked him a question on Fox, I guess. I never spoke to him. He doesn't remember the call. He doesn't remember. I never spoke. And then I produced a phone call. I had it. It took me about 2 minutes. I said, well, here's the call. It lasted 16 minutes and 4 seconds. And it was at 12:30 in the evening. I actually made a call. It didn't pick up. I called him a second time. And he picked up. And I told him, I said, you have to get your ass in gear because you're going to have a problem there. And he would have. If we didn't bring the military in, he would have had, you would have right now something. And I went through it because I follow the rules 100%. And I watched in Minnesota where you have the man who ran for vice president of the United States. Fortunately, he was a disaster. But he wouldn't call in the National Guard. And I eventually called in the National Guard, but it was 7 days late. I said, I'll never do that again. I'm never going to, if I see problems brewing, if they're not going to do the problem, I'm not going to wait 2 weeks. Because that city, Minneapolis, burned down. You remember the CNN anchor? He was standing there saying, yes, this is a peaceful rally. And behind him, the entire city was on fire. Looked like World War II. And I appreciate the question. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
2 questions, if I may, sir. First, the terrible, horrific plane crash in India today. I'm sure you saw the images on TV. Your reaction to that first, and will you speak to Prime Minister Modi?
The plane crash was terrible. I've already told them anything we can do. It's a big country, a strong country. They'll handle it, I'm sure. But I let them know that anything we can do, we'll be over there immediately. But it was a horrific crash. It looks like most are gone. They actually maybe have a couple survivors, which is just heard. But that was a horrible crash. Nobody has any idea what it might be. I gave him a couple of pointers. I said, maybe you look at this or that. You know, we saw the plane. It looked like it was flying pretty well. It didn't look like there was an explosion. It just looked like the engines maybe lost power. But boy, that is a terrible crash. It's one of the worst in aviation history. Yeah, second.
Sir, that conflict with Iran can be avoided?
Well, I'd love to avoid the conflict. Iran's going to have to negotiate a little bit tougher, meaning they're going to have to give us some things that they're not willing to give us right now. I'm the last person. I've kept us out of wars. We defeated ISIS completely, 100%. And I haven't had it's peace through strength. I believe in peace through strength. We're the greatest military in the world. I rebuilt the military, as you remember, for 4 years. I rebuilt the military. And then we gave a chunk of it away, but it was still peanuts. It was a lot, but it was peanuts compared to what we rebuilt. Gave it to Afghanistan, one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of our country with the whole withdrawal, the way they withdrew was very embarrassing. But we rebuilt the military. We have the greatest, strongest military. We defeated ISIS. We defeated ISIS. We defeated ISIS in 4 weeks. It was told to be 5 years. It was going to take 5 years, anywhere from 4 to 5 years. We did it in 4 weeks with, by the way, headed by the general who's now the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's why he's there. He said it would take 4 weeks. faster. So we have a great country, and we're going to keep it that way. And when it comes to Los Angeles or other cities, if we see other cities are gearing up, and these people are agitators, they're paid, they're professionals, they're insurrectionists, they're troublemakers, they're all of those things. But I believe they're paid, and we're going to find out through Pam Bondi and her great staff, her great people at Justice, who they are. And Mike, I think you're doing some investigations in that in Congress, but we're going to find out who they are, because they're really, I think what they're doing is unbelievably illegal. Just one thing. So they took the bricks away from people. They're walking in with satchels of bricks. You know, why do you have bricks? You have bricks because you throw bricks. They're very potent. If they hit you, they kill you. And they took them away. The military took them away. They saw him. What the hell is this? The guy could hardly carry me. Many bricks. He's a strong guy, couldn't carry him. And they saw that and they took him away. Then they found others with bricks. But they're ingenious. They also brought hammers along, very heavy hammers. And I saw them pounding the curb and pounding the sidewalk. And it was like a military operation. This guy's pounding strong, boom, big shots. And it was breaking up granite, the granite curbs. And the granite was breaking up and the concrete was breaking up. And there was lines of people standing there and they're handing him. And then he stopped handing them. They just went down and picked him up. It was so professional. I said, that's a professional organization. This is not like people at random. This guy's breaking up because they couldn't use the bricks. So who would think of this even? Did a lot of damage. A lot of curbs are broken. A lot of sidewalks broken. But I never saw that before. That's one I haven't seen. I thought I saw it all. And they have it on tape. And with that, people get killed. You know, they go to the bridges and they drop the concrete off the top of the bridge with a car coming along at 70 miles an hour and the person dies. We had a lot of car problems. You saw that. They were all over the road. They were littered all over the road where the cars got stopped by concrete going through the front windshield. Now, these are bad people. If we didn't go...
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It also helps with the health of the mitochondria, help to build up those ATP levels, super important to have energy for your cells, and it will help to protect neurons. Super important if you're age 40 or older. Take ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10. And NAD Plus supplement will boost up your NAD Plus levels. That will give you the energy you need. It'll also help to repair DNA damage and protect neurons. Stack it with ubiquinol for max benefit. Please go to my store, get the ubiquinol and the NAD Plus. Super important, especially if you're age 40 or older. Protect those neurons. C60, very potent antioxidant. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, or extra virgin olive oil. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach. If you work out, take it before your workout to soak up the free radicals that you're generating during your workout, and you'll notice that you recover quicker. C60 is going to soak up those free radicals, reduce the stress in the cell, help with the health of the mitochondria. Your energy levels are going to go up. And by reducing stress at the cellular level and the tissue level, you're actually improving your organs, your glands, your immune system, your endocrine system. Super important. Soaking up those free radicals at the vascular level is reducing oxidized LDL. And when you're reducing the chances of having oxidized LDL, you're reducing the chances of plaque buildup. And C60 helps with neurons. By soaking up those free radicals, you're reducing the stress of the neuron. You're keeping the myelin sheath healthy. The neuron mitochondria is going to be having a healthy population. And when you have lots of mitochondria that's healthy in your neuron, you're going to have lots of ATP. And you need that to make those neurotransmitters to allow for that electrical signal in your neural network. Super important for memory and for cognition and for even kinematics. So having healthy neurons is super important. So take the C60, take a teaspoon a day, every day. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce if you buy the higher ounce configuration. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60. stacks really well with resveratrol, NAD+, ubiquinol, clarity factor. Start protecting your neurons, super important. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Just buying your way in a very legitimate way. And, you know, you have stories where Apple wants to hire somebody and they can't hire because he can't stay. He went to a great school. He finished first in his class. They made him a big offer and everything's done, but he has no idea whether or not he's going to be able to stay. And I'm all for making sure that people like that can go to work for all of our great companies. And you know what they do? They go back to their country, and there are stories that are all over the place. They go back to their company and they start a company just like they were going to start here. They end up starting it in China or India or someplace else, and now they're among the richest people in the world. They've got thousands and thousands of employees that make it great. This is happening all the time because they're not allowed to stay. And I think we'll probably end up doing something about that, right? I think. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You in the blue, please. Light blue.
Thank you, Mr. President. How close are you to step back on between Ukraine and Russia? We see a very bad escalation. Are you going to leave it in the hands of the Europeans?
I'm very close to the situation. I'm very disappointed in Russia, but I'm disappointed in Ukraine also because I think deals could have been made. And, you know, we're losing 5,000, 6,000 people a week, soldiers mostly, but also people living in towns because they're getting hit by missiles again. How'd you like to live in a building and you think a missile has a good chance of hitting your building during the evening? It's horrible. Must be horrible to live like that. But, I mean, we'll get it, but it's, I'm disappointed that it's not done. We did great with India and Pakistan. We did very good with Israel. I thought, look, October 7th was a disaster. People forget, you know, they like to forget. That was a horrible thing. But, you know, none of these things would have happened if I were president. If I were president, none of it would have happened. You wouldn't have the Israel problem. Iran was broke. They had no money. We had big sanctions on them. Biden immediately let them get rich. $300 billion they have right now. But they had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah. They had no money for anything. It was perfect. We wouldn't have had inflation that was caused by oil, Chris. The oil price went through the roof. It was also caused by their spending, but it was caused more by oil than anything else. The oil went so high, got close to $100 a barrel. And that also kept the war going with Putin because at $100 a barrel, that was a big money-making experience. But now it's down to where it's not so good for them anymore. No, it's very important to get that solved. That's a bloodbath. That's a terrible bloodbath that's going on. Yeah, please go ahead.
For stopping the war between them. India says that they cannot talk to Pakistan unless Pakistan takes actions against terrorists.
We're going to get those two getting together, you know? I told them, India and Pakistan, they've had a long time rivalry over Kashmir. And I said, I can solve anything. I'll be your arbitrator. I will be your arbitrator. I can solve anything. And I started the first question, how long has this been going on? They said, 2,000 years. I said, oh, that's not right. They don't think it. When I heard 2,000 years, they said, maybe I'll have John this on that problem.
Will you publish the striking letter, Ed?
Peter?
Thank you, President Trump. I have two. First, on immigration. What made you change your mind about targeting in California farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business?
Well, we're not targeting. In fact, if you look today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, you know, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, you know, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you know, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out, and you know what happens? They end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons and everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers, and leisure too, hotels. We're going to have to use a lot of common sense on that.
And my other question about the Middle East. As the Israelis apparently gear up for some kind of an attack, a possible attack on Iran, are you trying to talk Netanyahu out of doing that, or are you so against Iran having a nuclear weapon that you're okay, he does his thing because it's not an American war?
Yeah, it's a very fair question. Look, I want to have an agreement with Iran. We're fairly close to an agreement. We are fairly close to a pretty good agreement. It's got to be better than pretty good, though, but it's got to be, I'd much prefer an agreement. As long as I think there is an agreement, I don't want them going in because I think that would blow it. Might help it, actually, but it also could blow it. But we've had very good discussions with Iran. Whether or not we get there, I can't tell you, but it'll happen soon. I say this, Peter, very strongly. They can't have, whether it's going in or not going in, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I'd prefer the more friendly path.
Can you tell us what the Israelis told of servicemen and women who are stationed in the Middle East?
They didn't tell me anything, but I said, look, there's a chance of massive conflict. We have a lot of American people in this area, and I said, we got to tell them to get out because something could happen soon. And I don't want to be the one that didn't give any warning and missiles are flying into their buildings. It's possible. So I had to do it. I had the choice. Do I do it or not? Doing it has its downside, but it also has its upside. Like, you're going to save a lot of lives if it should happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Right? Thank you.
Mr. President, for Americans that are coming to Washington on Saturday for the military parade,
It's going to be a great day.
What would you like folks to take away from that day? What would you hope that they would remember? And also, Mr. President,
our country is and how strong our military is. We have the strongest military in the world. You know, it's very interesting. 3 weeks ago, it was the end of anniversary, end of World War II. And I called France, and Macron was a good man. I said, what are you doing? He goes, we're celebrating World War II, our victory. I said, your victory? Your victory. Tell me about that. And then I called somebody else, and I happened to speak to President Putin at the time. Now, in all fairness to him, he lost 51 million people, and he did fight. Russia fought. Sort of interesting, isn't it? He fought with us in World War II, and everybody hates him. In Germany and Japan, they're fine. You know, someday somebody will explain that, but I like Germany and Japan too. But Putin is a little confused by that, you know. He said, we lost 51 million people and we were your ally. And now everybody hates Russia and they love Germany and Japan. I said, let's explain that sometime, okay? But it's a strange world. But I will say this, look, I want them to go away saying how great our country is and how great our military is. And I was making all these calls, and for some reason, I spoke to like 4 different places. Sir, are you celebrating? And I said, you know, we won World War II and World War I, right? We won them. And yet we're the only country that doesn't celebrate. Everybody's celebrating except us. And I said, we should celebrate too.
there are several No Kings protests planned across the country on Saturday as well. What are your thoughts on those?
What are they called? No Kings?
No Kings.
I don't feel like a king. I have to go through hell to get stuff approved. A king would say, I'm not going to get this. A king would have never had the California mandate to even be talking to him. He wouldn't have to call up Mike Johnson and Thune and say, fellas, you got to pull this off. And after years, we get it done. No, we're not a king. We're not a king at all. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir,
Go ahead.
Mr. President, sir, you made a lengthy posting today on Truth Social about Senator Rand Paul. Do you expect to see him at the picnic tonight, sir?
I do. I look forward to seeing him, actually. I like him. He's the hardest vote in the history of the U.S. Senate to get. Probably won't get him, but he's a very tough vote. I mean, he's a very tough vote. He's always been a friend of mine. You know, I endorsed him and got him elected. I got him elected twice. But I don't think he understands how great this bill is. This is a great bill. no tax on tips, no tax on, you know, the Social Security payments. It's unbelievable what happens. No tax on overtime. You work overtime, no more tax. It's so, those are big, but they're minor compared to the big things. Taxes reduced. And let's look at the other side. If it doesn't get approved, a 68% tax increase, 68%, including the fact that the Trump tax cuts kick in, but it's a 68% tax increase and many other bad things. I don't even want to, some of them are so bad, I don't even want to talk about them. I think it's one of the greatest bills we'll ever pass in this country. And I think that Leader Thune and this gentleman right here, what he's gone through on this with, you know, we started off with a majority of 1. Now I guess we have 7. So it's like easier, but it's really sort of 3. It's 7, but it really equates to 3, right? And we have great support. I mean, I can't tell you, I can't guarantee, but when you have a majority of essentially 3, where you can't lose anything more than 3 votes, and you get it passed, it's pretty amazing. And I think it's going to haunt the Democrats because most of the bill is common sense. It's tax cuts, it's border wall funding, it's military funding properly spent. It's all things that are like common sense. They're all good. There's nothing tricky about it. It's basic stuff. And we don't intend on getting one, think of it, not one Democrat vote in the House. Mike, not one. Maybe somebody will come along. I don't know how they can run for office. So many different things. We're gonna, very important, Medicare and Medicaid are gonna be.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gel. You can get it in the tube form or the quick dispenser form. Very high quality gels. It's dual purpose. You can use it as a aftershave, a daily skincare, put it on a wound to help it heal quicker. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it around your hands, around your eyes, around your mouth, around your nose, and around your ears. Lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. Super important to be prepared. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gel. It's dual purpose. When you turn age 40, or if you're older, it's important to start paying attention to the health of your pancreas. Taking digestive enzyme complex will reduce the stress on your pancreas. It will help you to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. It'll allow you to digest properly. So take this every day so you can break up those carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. In addition, it has bromelain in it. Bromelain is an enzyme that is fibrinolytic, so it's going to help to break up clots. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take care of your pancreas and take the digestive enzyme complex. It will also help if you're an athlete and you're doing a pre or post-workout fueling, to take the digestive enzyme complex to help break up the fuel source. Now let's talk about dual purpose stack that's going to help with your bone density and your cardiovascular. So let's talk about the bone density first. Taking K2, MK7 molecule with the vitamin D3, they work together to help to absorb calcium. If you take magnesium, you're going to increase the efficacy of your vitamin D3. Do resistance training, and that's going to help you to deposit new bone matrix, and over time, your bone density will get better and improve. That's super important, especially when you get older. In addition, D3 and K2 can help with the vascular system by pulling out some of that calcium depositing around plaque that is built up and reduce the chances of further calcium depositing. So take the K2 and the D3 together, super important. Now, you can also stack it with olive leaf extract or take olive leaf extract separately. But olive leaf extract is a dual purpose supplement. It's going to bring down inflammation. That's going to help your immune system. But also, olive leaf extract, by bringing down that inflammation at the vascular level, it's going to reduce plaque formation. And olive leaf extract helps to control your lipid profile. It helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. That's super important because less oxidized LDL means less plaque buildup. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. It's a great way. Stack it with the D3 and the K2, and you're helping with your bone density, you're helping with your immune system, and you're helping with your cardiovascular system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract, vitamin D3, and the K2. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Let's go to Bloomberg.
For the governor, the reality is that the president is likely going to have ground to stand on here, particularly as it pertains to the National Guard, number one, because it's not unprecedented. And number two, because they are going to argue, they being the Justice Department, that these are foreign folks that are in here and the state is not doing enough. And they're going to use the examples of the waving of the Mexican flag and to say that this is a national issue. He is the president, so he has every right to nationalize these troops. Hard to tell how this comes down, but I do think it's likely probably going to go the president's way.
We've got a headline on the terminal here and a story that we are preparing to follow today that lands in the noontime hour Eastern time, the IPO of Chime. Chime Financial, CHYM, the ticker, out of the gates here at $43, remembering the IPO price was $27. And pretty remarkable, Tyler, this thing is moving. We're up 65% here again, coming out of the IPO price, topping, now approaching actually $45. And one of the stories that we're going to be keeping very handy today on Wall Street. This is something that, of course, follows the very successful IPO of Circle and brings us to an interesting place. The story behind this company is really fascinating, Tyler, because Chime has really made its mark as a bank for those with lower incomes, living paycheck to paycheck, 35% or more female employees, and they're giving the big boys a run for their money. In fact, competing with the likes of JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America. Big reaction today in the market.
Yeah, exactly, Joe. And the offering raised $864 million for the company and some of its investors, with 32 million shares priced above a marketed range of $24 to $26 each.
There you have it. We're just below $44 for a share of Chime, up 61%. We'll keep tabs on this for you and bring in some experts in our program as we want to stick with the panel on this. Rick, we just heard from the president, and we're going to be hearing from the court. We're going to be hearing from the judge at some point later on today in this Trump versus Newsom world that we are in. Has Gavin Newsom succeeded in becoming at least the temporary head of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think a lot of these initiatives like the lawsuit and even the troops, I mean, these are two of the most performative politicians in the history of the world. And so they use these platforms as political weapons. And I think it almost doesn't matter what the outcome is of the court case today, because Gavin Newsom's already gotten his value for standing up to Donald Trump, making the lawsuit, saying, you know, that he's not adding to the peace, he's creating controversy. And it covers some of his tracks on the fact that you do have looters, you do have a bad situation in LA. And we hope it all resolves itself quickly, regardless of whether there's troops there or not. So President Trump, of course, you know, he's been warning about these things. He just repeated his concerns that he didn't act quick enough, you know, in the past. And so he's not going to hesitate in the future. And I think that as these other protests spread throughout the country, which there was even an altercation with ICE folks in Tucson, Arizona today. I mean, it's everywhere you can look. You wonder how much does Donald Trump really want to create a precedent that every time a window gets broken, you know, or a car gets burned, does he want to put in National Guard troops? So I think they're both creating a little bit of a trap for themselves, but these guys seem to always get away with it. So let the race begin for 2028, because that's more of what this is about rather than peace and security.
Right. And Jeannie, I want to talk a little bit more about the policies that led us to this point. As Rick was talking about immigration, we had Cliff Young of Ipsos here the other day who told us that President Trump is still polling really well when it comes to his immigration policies, but Americans aren't so happy with the implementation of them. How did we get to this escalation point if we look at the actual policies that are going into place?
Yeah, it's such a good point. And you know, we are seeing a little bit of a break in some of the president's momentum that you're talking about, Tyler, because he himself posted on Truth Social a concern that about the workers on some of the farms, whether they're the avocado farms, whether they're the ranches down in Texas, because he too is looking at these polls. And while Americans in those 7 swing states he likes to talk about voted for him to deal with the criminal element and to deport from there, Americans, particularly independents, not as happy about the deportation of working Americans, people who have lived here a long time, the quote unquote DACA folks. And so when the president posted that today, it was, I think, a turning point of recognition that he knows that this could get unpopular if he keeps up with this extreme aspect. And you saw Governor Newsom respond and say, turns out chasing hardworking people through ranches and farms and snatching women and children off the street, it's not good policy. That's what the president is recognizing now.
The battle of political optics with Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis. Our great panel will be back in our second hour here on Balance of Power. Big thanks as well to Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Much more ahead. The president speaking about Iran and a potential imminent attack. That's next on Bloomberg.
A little bit of a market update here. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,035. VIX is trading at 1793. Euro is trading at 115. Oil is trading at 68.21. And the BITO is trading at 21.57. And the USD Japanese yen is trading at 143.60. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Heirloom barley. It's a high density protein. It's going to help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. Take it every day. Take a scooper a day. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, milk, or even a smoothie, but take it every day to help to detoxify that body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. Now, by bringing down that inflammation, that's going to help your immune system, that's going to help your joints, that's also going to help your vascular system and your brain function. Overinflammation in at the cerebral level can cause problems. So it's really important to keep inflammation down. It's part of the protocol for anti-aging, soaking up free radicals and bringing down inflammation and revving up those energy levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. The differences between the gladiator barley and the heirloom barley is that you get all the benefits of heirloom barley in gladiator barley, but gladiator barley also helps to build muscle. Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It is a very comprehensive compound. You can read the label on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It targets multiple systems. It targets your vascular system, your heart, your brain function, musculature, revs up energy levels, and revs up your metabolism. Super important to take every day. And what you'll notice is that you're controlling your A1C levels. You're going to have a steady burn of energy throughout the day. You're going to be able to concentrate. You're going to sleep better. And you're going to lose weight. Take this as your meal for your breakfast or your lunch. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, smoothie, or even milk. And when you do that for breakfast or for lunch, you're going to notice that you're losing weight safely, You're going to have a steady burn of energy, and you're going to be able to get healthier. Stack this for additional benefits with the Gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get Boomer Boost, the heirloom barley, or the Gladiator barley.
Edition of Balance of Power as the U.S. Treasury holds a multi-billion-dollar auction of 30-year bonds, and it's happening just moments after Chime debuted on Wall Street. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for being with us here on the early edition of Balance of Power. Investors today in the bond market, Kaylee, balancing worries about debt and tariffs, among other things, coming out of Washington.
Yeah, the question is going to be, are there demand for longer dated maturities when there are ongoing fiscal concerns about the trajectory of the debt and deficit of the United States, with the one big beautiful bill, of course, still being pushed by Congress and the Senate specifically. An important meeting will happen at the White House later today with Senate leaders like Mike Crapo of the Finance Committee and the majority.
The 30-year Treasury is trading at 4.856. 4.855. That's actually pretty good. It was trading as high as 4.9, and the lower the number, the better, because prices of bonds are inversely related to the yield.
Resolutions today to repeal some statewide EV incentives and the gas car ban in California. We're spinning a lot of plates here. We're going to have a live update on the auction. Mike McKee and Ira Jersey are with us. We're also tracking Chime, and we'll be watching that through the day. It had a big pop at the open. We'll see where it goes for the session.
Yeah, it did. It actually opened 59% above the IPO price, which was $27. After opening at 43, we're now just around $39. But let's get a check on that and everything else moving in financial markets right now with Charlie Pellet up in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Kaylee Lyons. Indeed, spinning a lot of plates on the business desk today. A lot of moving parts to this market. You mentioned Chime. Let's begin there. We've got the Chime IPO with the stock surging right now, 46.3%. Financial tech firm. First day out, ticker CHYM. By the way, that offering led by Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan Chase. But the important thing, stock up right now, 45.5% on Chime. We've got that $22 billion sale of 30-year debt, a fresh test on whether spiraling deficits are causing investors to shun the maturity. We'll have more on that coming up for you here on Balance of Power. Equity markets higher, but certainly a lot of bouncing around right to the numbers, with the S&P now up 12 at 6,034, up by about 0.2%. The Dow up 20, up under 0.1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 32. For NASDAQ, that is a gain right now of 0.2%. Your 10-year 4.36%, with the 2-year 3.90%. Gold up $29 the ounce, 33.85, up 0.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude little changed, up under 0.1%. And Bitcoin right now down 1.2%. 107,771 on the Bitcoin. Again, Chime Financial trading underway, bears repeating. That stock surging in its first day of trading. Right now, we've got Chime Financial up by 48%. The Boeing crash. Boeing shares down 4.2%, but we are now getting reports that a single passenger survived that fiery crash of the Air India plane today. That according to an Indian minister who is confirming again at least one crash survivor. Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
All right, Charlie Pellet in New York, thank you so much. Keeping track of the stock market for us, keeping track of the Treasury market as well, which, as Charlie mentioned, of course, we just saw a 30-year bond auction that actually drew a lower yield than the pre-sale when issued yield, drawing 4.844% on that maturity. The pre-sale yield, Joe, was 4.859%. And as a result, while yields were already lower across the curve today in the aftermath of PPI data and in considering other factors, we're seeing another tick lower today on the 30-year in the aftermath of this auction. It appears that the demand question perhaps not as bad as some had feared.
Yeah, that's right. We have two great voices for you.
And here again, all those damn economists were wrong. They've been wrong for 7 to 8 weeks on this.
Correspondent at World Headquarters in New York. We're also joined by Ira Jersey, Bloomberg Intelligence Chief U.S. Interest Rate Strategist. Ira's going to take a minute to bear down on this. Michael, I'm reminded by the comments on Bloomberg yesterday by Jeffrey Gundlach, DoubleLine. The quote was, "There's an awareness now that the long-term Treasury bond is not a legitimate flight to quality asset." How does that line hit now that we've seen this number?
Well, apparently Mr. Gundlach wasn't bidding, or other people weren't listening to him, because we...
Well, the thing is the 30-year Treasury is more for insurance companies and pension funds for a 30-year outlay. You know, and it's just to protect the portfolio and a long-term. It's not for typical investors. That's why the belly of the curve is where all the action is.
It's hard to put this out as any kind of reaction that requires a safe haven, because there's a lot of news out there, but there isn't anything that would be driving people towards a certain issue of a U.S. Treasury at this point.
All right, so Ira, jump in here. How do you view this takedown, which seems overall to be pretty decent?
So our system graded an A. So yeah, one of the highest grades that we've seen for a bond auction in a little while. So to go back to what Michael was just saying, when you look at bid to cover, which is the number of bonds that people want to buy versus the amount on offer, it was actually it was the highest reopening of a the highest during a reopening over the last couple of months, and that's important, because look, the fact is that people do want long duration. There's still a lot of pension funds and other liability managers, so what we call LDI investors, liability driven investors, who need long duration assets, and there's not many other places to go. So people still have to buy treasuries, and there is a concern for sure that there's growing debt burden of the United States is going to make the U.S. debt unsustainable, but that might be true in other assets too, right? So if you go to Germany, for example, they're probably going to be issuing a whole lot of debt as well. Granted, they're coming from a much better starting place in terms of their deficit, but there's a few alternatives that are as liquid as treasuries if you want to buy long-term debt.
Well, Mike, it really speaks to the pushback we've been hearing from the White House. Everybody's talking about when the soft data finally creeps into the hard data, when reality is going to catch up with Donald Trump, when people are going to wake up to how bad things are. It just hasn't happened yet. What needs to happen? The passage of the record.
Now think about this. Let's say an insurance company was buying a ton of treasuries in 1995. All right. And they were coming due, and they held a maturity, the 30-year bond. Okay. That would mean that they would have to roll over those maturities and purchase new maturities. Now, it's much more complex. I'm simplifying it. All right. To be able to help with the outlays of these pension and these insurance companies. So these economists, they all were focusing on, oh, Trump is focused on a weakening of the dollar, bringing back manufacturing, and that is a disruption of the global new order. So sell the dollar, sell treasuries, and sell equities. And I was like saying, no. Don't bet against America. Fortress America, don't bet against G.I. Joe, all right? When you bet against G.I. Joe, you lose, all right?
Out the evolution of yields over the last 2 years. And one of the things that you've noticed is we haven't broken out of any ranges anywhere along the curve, whether it's the 2-year, the 10-year, the 30-year, doesn't matter. We're in the same ranges where we were in 2023. The big difference now, though, is that the 2-year yield is close to the bottom of its range, whereas the 30-year yield is toward the top of the range. So that's the yield curve steepening. Now, that steepening occurs for several different reasons. One is expectations that the Fed is going to cut interest rates, the timing of which and the magnitude of which is still in doubt, but nonetheless, the market is pricing for the Fed to ease at some point over the next 18 months. But then the long end is projecting some of those fiscal fears, but in relationship to the 2-year, right? So we look at this absolute level of 5-year, 30-year yields, and that has to be taken into account that, look, not so long ago, 2-year yields and 30-year yields were exactly the same. Now they're 100+ basis points apart, right? So you have to consider where all of the points on the curve are to each other, not only the absolute level of yields at any one time.
Still, Ira, you remember the freak out that we saw in the bond market, the yippee reaction, as the president called it, after Liberation Day. Technically, put debt aside for a moment, nothing has actually changed
See, people aren't realizing that there is a very large, dark market of derivatives and swaps and swap options and caplets and all this stuff, right? So hedge funds and investment banks and, you know, these institutions, they get into some crazy stuff. So when there was this hit by the tariff war, their derivative market was in flux. And they do all this hedging to try to reduce risk, right? But then volatility went out of their normal range and it hurt these complex leveraging positions. And they had to sell to save, you know, to save these margin calls and, you know, and all these different complex strategies they had. So they had to sell treasuries to get cash to be able to buy more to help offset this crazy stuff that they were doing behind the scenes. And that was the reason why they didn't get into the market. When you kept on hearing why the S&P 500, it was retail. Retail is not leveraged. Retail doesn't have these complex derivative positions. So the retail was coming in and buying the dip, and the institutions couldn't do it. They didn't have the cash because they were trying to save these complex dark market derivatives that they were doing. And Bloomberg hasn't even said anything about that. And there's this term. Once in a while, you'll hear someone say these institutions were deleveraging. That's what I'm talking about. They were trying to deleverage. They were trying to slowly unwind their leverage. And to just unwind it, you can't just close it out because it would be a big loss. So you sell some treasuries. So that would bring up the yield, right? The market's going down. Their hedge positions aren't working because it's out of the normal volatility range. And so their Vega blew out. And what happens is they're selling treasuries to be able to maybe buy in more or to offset or maybe to rebalance these hedging strategies or to be able to raise cash, to be able to maintain a position just in case a margin call happens. These kinds of things are happening behind the scenes. They didn't take those treasuries, at least the institutional investors, typically, these institutionals that were leveraged up, they weren't selling the treasuries, taking the cash and moving them into equities. No. They were rebalancing their leverage position, or they were using the money that they sold for treasuries as for margin, for their margin call, or they're readjusting, unwinding, trying to unwind their leverage position. And this takes time. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why Trump was probably told by Bassett and some others like Ackman, you need 90 days, because it takes 90 days to unwind these things. And that's the reason why the institutional investors missed the boat. So what's really causing the problem in the treasury market? Is it these derivative markets? Is it the derivatives and these leverage positions of the institutional investors? Yeah, I think so. Now, I'm sure you didn't hear that anywhere else.
On Majority Leader Thune to get this bill done before the 4th of July break, because he knows the longer this bill sits around, the more it gets difficult to pass anything. And I think at this stage, the White House will take a bill under any circumstances versus a perfect bill. And the reality is the Senate is making big changes. So the question is, what will pass the House, after they get it out?
Rick reminding us of the old line, time kills deals. Jeannie, the fact of the matter is, if you're a Republican, even from your state of New York, and if you're obsessed with salt, you're still not going to vote for a massive tax hike on Americans, are you? If you vote no for this bill and it doesn't pass, that's what they get.
But the reality is, for people like Mike Lawler or so many of the Republicans in a state like New York, California, Jersey with high taxes, they are voting for a tax increase for their folks anyways, who have been suffering since the issue with salt emerged as a result of 2017. So for them, it doesn't make a difference. They know that they're politically going to be in huge trouble if they don't move forward in salt. And so I do think their threats are very, very real. And, you know, Rick is absolutely right. The longer this bill has stayed in the public eye, and you've seen the senators and representatives go home for holidays. We'll see that again for Juneteenth pretty shortly. You also see that public support for this bill, the more people learn about it, begins to go down. And that's what we've seen in some of the polls. And I think the president is well aware of that, which is why I believe he posted on Truth Social today and then reiterated in his comments his welcoming of Rand Paul, because Rand Paul has been very critical about the border funding for this bill. And President Trump is usually not so welcoming and supportive unless he knows he needs you or he needs to pull you along. So I think he's well aware of what is going on in these polls.
Well, that's not where the president's True Social post stopped today, Rick. We also got an interesting one specifically on the labor market and immigration, where the president said our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business have been stating that our very aggressive policy on immigration is taking very good long-time workers away from them, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace. He goes on to say this is not good, finishes with changes are coming. An admission that labor shortages are resulting from his policy. Rick, therefore, what policy changes do you think we're really likely to see?
You know, it kind of echoes the John McCain comprehensive immigration reform of 2005, right? Which is, hey, maybe we need a guest worker program while we crack down on, people here without permission. So it's really interesting. I mean, rather than approaching this as a comprehensive solution, the president seems really inclined to create controversy along the way. So obviously, at one point, Stephen Miller is at ICE last week telling them they're going to lose their job unless they step up the amount of deportations. At the same time, a week later, Donald Trump says, hey, I know these deportations are hurting farmers and other companies throughout the country. Maybe we ought to find a solution. Well, there's a solution there, right? I mean, it's called the guest worker program. It's been around for 20 years. And I'm not exactly sure if his voters will appreciate it, but it's exactly what we need today.
And history repeats. We should mention it was the congressional baseball game last evening. By the way, Republicans won it again. This evening, the congressional picnic on the South Lawn. We referred to this. Rand Paul's invited. Jeannie, can Donald Trump get work done there? They're going to be on the South Lawn looking at the stands that have been set up for the big parade, maybe a little punch. Can he close the deal tonight?
He's certainly going to try. This is, perfect for Donald Trump. And Joe, I just saw that you showed us that we may see a cancellation due to weather this weekend.
There's an isolated report there. I don't know. The fact of the matter is, though, it is going to be stormy and hot and raining, and we've got a lot of people who could be in harm's way. Jeannie Shanzano, Rick Davis, thank you both for the conversation. Kaylee, at the moment, the parade is set for 6:30 p.m. Saturday. Good luck getting into Washington.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the drops and the lozenges. Very high quality. You can get 3 different flavors for the drops. You get 100 drops in each bag. You can get it in cherry flavor, honey and lemon, and also in blueberry. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the drops. And I also have in stock the lozenges. You get 21 in each bag. The lozenges are larger than the drops. You can get it in elderberries ink. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's very important to take the lozenges or the drops right away to mitigate any irritation, no matter what season it is. So please make sure you're prepared. Have a few bags for your household and for work. You never know when you need them. please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of my show for today. We've been broadcasting for 4 hours. I greatly appreciate it. Please use discount 5. You get $5 off on any order on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you subscribe to all the channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. And if you would like to help support the work, you can also donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. The links are in the description of this video and on my website. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I will see you tomorrow.